just over 13 months ago, or it will be just over 13 months ago by the time this event takes place, Petr and Aljamain Sterling stepped into the cage to settle the UFC bantamweight title. A pretty competitive back and forth fight that was kind of slowly trending in Jan's direction, ended shockingly in the fourth round when he nailed Sterling with a clearly illegal knee, as Sterling was grounded at the time. Everybody seemed to be disappointed with the way it turned out. Jan and Sterling both. An immediate rematch seemed to be the most obvious play. And 13 months later, it is only now getting ready to happen. In that time, Sterling has had neck surgery that required a lengthy recuperation. Their rematch has been postponed at least once. It went long enough that the UFC created an interim bantamweight title, which Jan won over Corey Sandhagen last year. And what had been a tense but generally respectful rivalry has kind of degenerated into slinging of insults. And you just really feel as though everybody involved is ready to put this thing in the rearview mirror. It's kind of rare that I lead off talking about a pay-per-view by talking about the co-main event, but frankly, Sterling versus Jan is probably the biggest piece of unfinished business the UFC has going on its roster right now. This is the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 273. Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie. Let's not forget about them. They are the headliners. But I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good. I understand why you could lead with the co-main event, and you said let's not forget about the main event. That's what's going on with this card. Like, there's going to be fights that we're forgetting about that obviously we're going to talk about. But when I think about this card is loaded. I mean, it is deep, and we really have almost like a trio, main events going. With you have the actual main event, Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie. You have that rivalry fight, which to me, let's not call it a rivalry unless it ends with like a brawl at a steakhouse. And then, we'll settle for like there'll have to be a steakhouse. It could be a Walmart or something. But if there's a brawl outside the octagon, we'll call it a rivalry. And then you got a fight that out of all the fights probably most talked about is Gilbert Burns taking on Khamzat Chimaev, who is the talk of the town. So you got those three fights, but you have fights like I think of Rozenstruik versus Tybura. That's a fight that could headline a fight night. Mackenzie Dern versus Tecia Torres could headline a fight night. You got guys like Garry, who's a prospect that a lot of people are really big on. Kelvin Gastelum's fought for a title, and he's fighting in this card. Raquel Pennington, someone who's fought for the title, they're pulling in on short notice. I mean, This card is loaded.
Man,
Pennington and Ladd could headline a fight night.
Yes.
Yeah,
the second fight out of the gate, at least as the card is currently set up, is Vinc Pichel versus Mark Madsen. Now, this is lightweight, where you got to string together a lot of wins to actually get on the radar. But with Pichel, it's his history of injuries. With Madsen, it's that he was such a late starter and such a late bloomer. But on sheer talent, they might be top 15 guys. And they're the second fight out of the gate.
Yeah, this guy's loaded. I love this.
It's ridiculous.
I absolutely love this guy. Like it won't have the casual fan affair that other ones because it doesn't have that big drawing name, but it really should.
Well, the UFC did everything it could. I mean, it knew that this card needed Ilir Latifi versus Alexei Oleinik in order to just take it right over the top. It went from like an A+ card to an A++ card on paper when, we got Latifi versus Oleinik added to this one. That fight, of course.
That was the missing piece. It was
the missing piece. That fight, of course, had been scheduled for UFC on ESPN 33 2 weeks ago. It had to be postponed. They pushed it to this card. So just an embarrassment of riches becomes just a little more embarrassing. You mentioned the whole thing about maybe there not being a whole lot of casual fan appeal. Frankly, whatever casual fan appeal he has is the reason the Korean Zombie is on this card. Like on paper, like his recent track record, he doesn't jump out as the most deserving featherweight contender, but they need someone right now, and he's still got that little.
Stud.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Stud. He's a stud. Like,
Yeah. Oh no, he's a fantastic fighter. Yeah.
I feel like he was one of like 3 or 4 like horses in the race where they were all kind of even. There was no one that kind of stood out the pack, and the charm, the name, the Korean zombie. Even if you're a casual fan, you maybe might know that name. You won't know, as we said, we won't know if they promoted it as Alex Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung. Most people are like, "Oh, who the hell is Chan Sung Jung?" But you put it as a Korean zombie, then they remember. Obviously, you have the Korean fan base, which is obviously a huge area. They've been dying to get a champion over there, which very well could be the case after this weekend. And yeah, I guess that's why they picked him. But I don't know who else would have been the pick.
That's the other thing. The ace in the hole is they haven't fought yet. Is the ace in the hole that Jung has is he hasn't fought Volkanovski yet.
Yeah.
Like, I think Max Holloway would probably beat Jung. I think Brian Ortega did beat Jung, but
yeah,
both those guys have had their shot at the champ. So he might actually be.
This was supposed to be Holloway the third time.
Right. Which,
yeah, but I mean, when he fell out, I mean, who was left? Who was your? I think Calvin Kattar at the time was still booked. It was before he fought. What did he fight? Who
was it before the Chikadze fight?
Oh yeah, Chikadze. Yeah, Calvin Kattar wasn't. Josh Emmett is probably another guy that they may have considered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they probably made the right choice.
They probably did. Honestly, along with him, Khamzat Chimaev probably has the name that's going to kind of pull the most eyeballs of curiosity. He's become a bit of a sensation.
Yeah, if he does to Gilbert Burns what he's done to everybody else so far in the UFC, which is obviously a massive if, because it's freaking Gilbert Burns, one of the best guys in the world. If he does that, he's going to be the talk of this card. Like that's what the recap show we'll be talking about. That's what all the ESPN headlines, and he'll be the one that's get brought on Ariel Helwani's show, and he'll be the one with mouthing off to Nate Diaz or Colby Covington or Usman or something. Like he'll be the one getting all the eyeballs. One thing, a storyline that might get hidden a little bit, other than with the hardcores, is if Alex Volkanovski wins and he wins impressively, you got to start asking the question: is Alex Volkanovski the best fighter in the world? Pound for pound.
I believe right now he's number 2 in Sherdog's pound for pound rankings, right behind Kamaru Usman. I have to look at the UFC's own rankings, but I'm sure he's in the top 3 at worst.
Yeah, and the argument is does his win stand out more than Usman's? I don't know, but the whole point is, whatever you argue for Usman, it's at least equal to Volkanovski. Like his resume is going to be, it'd be Brian Ortega, the Korean Zombie, Max Holloway twice. Whether you think he won the second Holloway or not, but like his Jose Aldo. I mean, he's got a hell of a resume, and he's got this crazy long winning streak. And we talked about Usman before, and we talked about Islam Makhachev. Would they have a different reputation if they didn't have that one early loss? What about Volkanovski?
Oh, absolutely.
Crazy winning streak.
Yeah, is it 20 in a row now? 19 or 20 in a row that he's won? Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's interesting that you mentioned Aldo. One other thing I realized is, obviously, Sterling versus Jan was, it was 13 months ago. And right before that, Jan beat Aldo for the vacant title. And even then, Aldo probably didn't deserve that shot. And it would be the most natural thing in the world to think, oh, he's probably done as a top level contender. I mean, he's already an all-time great. He might be one of the 5 greatest fighters of all time, regardless of weight. But, it's been a good run. And since then, he's 3-0 with 3 wins, like convincing wins over top 10 fighters. And he might be the next guy to fight for the bantamweight title, like after Jan and Sterling settle it. I know he's not fighting here, but just I was reminded of how unbelievable Jose Aldo is when you mentioned.
I wouldn't pick Jose Aldo to win a title, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Where a little while ago, it seemed like it was out of the realm of possibility. Let's just talk about this real quick. Let me just give you a quick resume of Alex Volkanovski. And this wasn't my plan, but just looking over. Look at this run. Jeremy Kennedy, Darren Elkins, Chad Mendez, Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, and this is if he beats the Korean Zombie. How insane of a run is that?
It's starting from the Mendes fight. It's all top 5 fighters. Most of it is champs only, and it's a couple of the greatest fighters of all time.
It's funny
because ridiculous.
We talk about the argument for the greatest 145 pounders of all time, and I think both you and I put Jose Aldo number 1, and Max Holloway was kind of catching him a little bit. Volkanovski's got to start at least be in the neighborhood. He's got wins over both of them.
And in the case of Holloway in particular, it's in both of their primes. Like,
yeah. And I know someone's going to say, "Oh, McGregor has wins over both of them too." Like, I know. He actually did. This guy's and beat a much different Max Holloway than Conor McGregor did. But you could argue that Conor McGregor beat a different Jose Aldo. You could make that argument. So.
It'll be a conversation for the recap for sure.
Yeah, somehow we got Conor McGregor back in this argument.
There we go. That'll get us a few more clicks.
We got to get Henry Cejudo into it, and then we got the full bingo card.
Good. Oh, you ready to start talking about these fights?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We head now to the bantamweight division for a matchup between Julio Arce and the debuting Daniel Santos. Arce, the 32-year-old Tiger Schulman product, is 17-5 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series, and as a former 2-division champ from Ring of Combat, he was their bantamweight as well as featherweight champ for a while. He has been alternating wins and losses over his last 6 fights. Most recently, he got knocked out in the second round by Song Yadong at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Rodriguez last November. Before that, he knocked out Andre Ewell at UFC on ESPN Sandhagen versus Dillashaw in July. He will be welcoming Santos to the UFC. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 8-1 over a frankly strange career. He is 27. He's been a professional since I believe he was 17 years old, but just fought very, very sporadically and had a couple of over a year-long hiatuses as he did other things. But he is coming to the UFC now. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Truck driver at all in Brazil?
Sorry. I am not sure. He is coming to the UFC on a 2-fight win streak, but the last of those 2 wins was all the way back in December of 2019. He has been on the shelf for almost 2.5 years. He was in Brave CF, actually had a fight in Brave CF canceled, then was signed by the UFC and was supposed to debut last October. He was supposed to face Timur Valiev, which you're going to bring in a guy that hadn't fought in 2 years and make him fight Timur Valiev in his debut. That was terrible. Valiev fell out. Was
better.
Yeah.
Sorry. I I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine, dude. Interrupt anytime. This is a freeform show. Valiev fell off that card, was replaced by Marcelo Rojo, but then it was Santos who ended up having to withdraw. So his debut is postponed all the way until now. He comes in as the moderate underdog, where Arce is minus 200, Santos plus 170. Keith, it's kind of hard to get a bead on a fighter that hasn't fought really any high-level competition and hasn't fought at all in 2.5 years, which is exactly why I'm throwing it to you first.
It's so funny because we never do any talk before we do. We just kind of like, hey, how's it going? Little things like, what do you think about the card overall? But we don't really. I have no idea who Ben's going to pick before he makes a pick. I find out when everyone else does. I don't know the order. I don't know if I'm going to go first on this fight. I'm going to go second. We don't have requests, anything like that. I was hoping to go second on this one, and I'll tell you why. There ain't a lot of film on Daniel Santos. So I was kind of hoping you got some film, and I was just going to, whatever you said, you just started making things up, I seen a flying scissor kick knockout. I'm like, yeah, man, scissor kick knockout. I was going to go with whatever you were saying. I was going to repeat. I was going to take notes of what you were saying and repeat it. But, if you say high output, I would be like, good volume. Mix it up a little bit.
Well, I mean, let's have it be a freeform thing, because I learned the same thing as you did over the past couple days as I started really digging into this fight. Because his fight last October got canceled far enough in advance that I wasn't even to the point of really researching him. So that fell to me this week. And you're right, there's not a lot of film on him. It's in generally like he had a couple fights in Brave CF, but even Brave CF was not really Brave CF in 2018.
Yeah, some of these are hard to get. Some of the areas that I know, like I won't give away where I find some of my stuff. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but the videos were taken down. I saw some highlight things. I never, ever do this. I never go to other people's predictions. I don't want to be influenced by other people's predictions. He
doesn't even look at the odds until I tell him, like right before we talk.
I don't look at the odds because I don't want to be influenced by the odds. Because sometimes they'll see something and all of a sudden you'll let the odds talk you out of it and stuff. I went to other people's predictions to see if they found film, and from what I've seen of this guy, and nobody's ever saying the same thing. From the highlights I've seen, he's a good athlete. He's a striker with some fast hands. He throws combinations. He likes spinning attacks. You get a lot of highlights of spinning attacks. Plus power, but he doesn't look like a true like one punch knockout guy. Kind of just like overwhelms you with speed, and throws a lot of kicks. Can get some submissions. Yeah, I agree with you. Brave FC is not CF is not the same as it is now. Yeah. He did fight in ACB, which I also like. So he's coming from organizations that I do like. Obviously, also the country of Brazil is historically been good at producing MMA fighters. So I like that. Now, Arce, like, we know we have Arce. Like, Arce is a very good fighter. Arce is a definition of very good, but not great. He's a southpaw who's well-rounded, technically sound on his feet, uses feints well, and great head movement to set up his shots, snapping jab, beautiful straight right. He's a Tiger Schulman's guy, so he's going to look to go to the body first to set up the power shots, which I love that about Tiger Schulman's team. Very well coached team. He go back to like the Andre Ewell fight. That's a fight that he really did that in. Large arsenal of kicks. Will go down to the calf kick and then just mix it up with a high kick right afterwards. Though he doesn't check leg kicks. We saw that in the Dawodu fight. But the one thing about Tiger Schulman's team in general and Julio Arce, they will make adjustments fight to fight. Like you could see Arce in the next fight checking leg kicks. Like that wouldn't surprise me at all. He isn't known for his wrestling, but he can get takedowns in close fights, in close rounds to win a fight. Not a smothering top control guy, but he does have 5 submission wins on his record. So as far as the prediction goes, I'm taking Arce simply because I just know Arce is a solid UFC talent who's really just a tough, like you mentioned about who did you say it was Valiev he was going to fight in his debut?
Yeah, he was going to have debut against Valiev.
Like that's as tough as it comes. Arce's are extremely tough out too. Like that's like the next consolation prize isn't that good. I have no confidence in this pick simply because I just don't know enough about Santos. But I have enough confidence because I know Arce is good, and not many people can beat Arce. So give me Arce by decision.
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion I came to after watching as much tape as I could on Daniel Santos. I mean, one clue to Santos's game is, on his way up, he spent some time at Shoot-A-Box Team Cyborg, like not Chris Cyborg, but Evangelista Cyborg. And there's a little bit of that to him where Cyborg, he was never the most accomplished of the old school Shoot-A-Box guys, never the most technically adept, but one of the most aggressive of them. And a guy that did throw plenty of volume. I see a little of that in Santos. I mean, he's more refined than that, and he's actually been at Shoot-A-Box Diego Lima, at least leading up to this fight. So who knows what changes that's made in his tool set. I mean, again, the guy is 27. So even if he was fighting 3 or 4 times a year, we wouldn't be surprised to see changes or incremental improvements from fight to fight. But who knows what this guy's going to look like after almost 2.5 years away. The last time he fought, he was like 25 years old, and now he's 27 or 28. Like, so I won't be completely shocked if he comes in and he's just a completely new man and he lances Julio Arce and there's a great new arrival in the bantamweight division. But I'm not picking that. Like you, I'm going to go with the more known quantity. And while Arce has alternated wins and losses for the last couple of years now, it's not because he's inconsistent. It's just because he's kind of settled into his spot in the division. And he doesn't get bad losses. If he's fighting a really good guy, he sometimes loses. If he's fighting a not so good guy, he beats him. Given that, definitely taking Arce here. Give me Arce by decision as well. All right, a strawweight matchup between Piera Rodriguez and Kay Hansen. Rodriguez, the 29-year-old Panamanian, will be making her UFC debut in this fight. She is a perfect 7-0 as a professional mixed martial artist, and she appeared on Dana White's Contender Series last October, where she took a unanimous decision over Valeska Machado. She'll be taking on Hansen. The 22-year-old Californian is 7-5 overall. She is 1-2 since joining the UFC as a former standout from Invicta FC. She's on a 2-fight losing streak since winning her UFC debut over Jinyu Fry. She lost to Corey McKenna last November, came back at flyweight and fought Jasmine Yasuda-Vicious in January at UFC 270, lost a unanimous decision there, and for those who might not remember, there was a visible market size difference between the two women. Maybe for that reason, maybe because of the result, Hansen has decided to move back down to strawweights. There's other stuff that's gone in there. She's spoken openly about, struggling with mental health and specifically with eating disorders. But her head and body seem to be right at this point, or, at least that's what she's betting on as she moves back down to 115. She is the slight underdog here. Rodriguez minus 125 to get it done in her debut. Hansen available at even money or even plus 105 or so right now. I'm interested in this fight because I understand part of why Rodriguez is the favorite here. And I think a lot of it is to do with people being a little gun shy about Hansen. They saw her get pretty soundly out-wrestled in her last fight and just kind of physically bullied and pushed around. And that's not a good look for a woman who, at her best, is the bully and the one who's pushing people around. And just, her openness about having had trouble making the strawweight limit, then, combined with how she performed at flyweight. Now she's moving back down to strawweight. So there's a bit of wait and see about her maybe. But I think stylistically, Rodriguez kind of plays into Hansen's skills pretty well. Rodriguez, her hype reels, like if you look at her hype reels and her highlight reels and how they kind of talked about her going into Dana White's Contender Series, she presents as a striker, but her best work is on the ground. On the Contender Series, I mean, she won over Valeska Machado. She was the one who was trying to bring the fight to the ground in all 3 rounds. And basically, she won the rounds where she managed to get it done. She lost the one round where she really wasn't able to get Machado to the ground for any length of time. And unlike Yasuda-Vicious, who is a tall, large flyweight and a decorated wrestler, Rodriguez is about Hansen's same size. I'm kind of interested to see where this plays out, how hard Rodriguez tries to bring it to the ground, because I think Hansen's going to be physically stronger. And unless she really is sapped by the weight cut, I think she'll be the stronger fighter for all 3 rounds. And I think it'll be more or less up to Hansen where the fight takes place. So I'm interested to see if Rodriguez tries to bring it to the ground, and I'm interested to see what level of success she has in doing so. And if they're stuck on the feet, how much success each of them has. Because Hansen's striking, I mean, she's a gifted athlete, but her striking strikes me, no pun intended, as pretty rudimentary. Give me Hansen in this one by decision in a fight where she's the one kind of choosing to keep it on the feet until maybe late in the fight when she's won the first round or maybe the first 2 rounds. But yeah, give me Kay Hansen by decision in a pretty fun fight here and a slight upset right out of the gate.
Wow. Yeah, so we talk about fights that, being loaded throughout the whole card. You wouldn't say that with this fight. Like, this isn't a high-level fight. This is a card filler. But I think both fighters are fun. Like, their styles. Kay Hansen's only 22 years old, which is so shocking, being that she's got, a lot of fights on her record. She's fought in Invicta. She's fought in Contender Series, fought in the UFC. Like, she's got good experience for only 22 years old. And though, as you mentioned, her back is really against the wall after dropping back-to-back fights, I want to point out, I thought she beat Corey McKenna. And again, I'm glad that she's moving down to 115 from 125 because, as you mentioned, she was way too small. And Though she is strong. Like I think the size and the length and the reach was more, and obviously strength too. But at 115, she's pretty strong. Now I don't know about this whole eating disorder, how that affects, and I don't know if that's good to be cutting weight. If that I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I know. I've known many 115-pound women bodies, but not Kay Hansen's. For the record, she's so I just got fired. Kay Hansen, she's well rounded. I'd say she's a good boxer. Like I agree with you saying she's definitely better on the ground, but that's why I said she's well rounded. But she's a good boxer. Traditional high guard defense, busy jab, does well to kind of get to the pocket on low combos. She likes those close quarter striking. She really sits on her punches. She likes to throw some step in knees, which I love. She's I'd say good wrestler, good reactionary double, good takedowns from the clinch, especially when she's not extremely undersized. She struggles to get some. She struggles to keep her opponent down because she's very aggressive on the ground. She's looking to end the fight with submissions, but she does have 4 subs. But the biggest weakness, we definitely saw in the last fight, if she's put on her own back, she can really struggle to get back up. Now, Rodriguez, she's 29 years old, so you kind of have a little bit more of a finished product when you have with her. She has really developed her power. She can be a little gun shy, though, a little too patient. When she lets her hands go, she's good. She's a good boxer, pretty fast hands. I like that she gets in the pocket and she fires off some really powerful hooks, very like Jessica Andrade style to her. She throws everything into her shots, but she likes to be the bull. She doesn't like to be the one getting backed up, being pressured. She will look to wrestle if that's the case. Has some pretty good entries, though she'll often shoot without a setup, or she can also like overextend herself, put herself out of position. She needs to improve her own takedown defense, and she's not a submission threat. She has no submissions on her record. This is a really fun fight, as I said, especially because I think them are very similar in style. They're both usually more physically dominant fighter, the more of the brute. Rodriguez is the more finished product, but Hansen probably is. Hansen's the work in progress and has the higher upside. I'm going to take Hansen also. She has the higher level experience. She's also probably the little bit more well-rounded fighter. I say we have a back-and-forth war right out the box with Hansen winning due to just having more output. So I'm with you in a slight upset right away, and give me Hansen by split decision.
There you have it. Next up, Anthony Hernandez welcomes Josh Fremd to the UFC. Hernandez, the 28-year-old Californian, is 8-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series, and he has alternated wins and losses throughout his UFC run, losing to Marcus Perez, beating Jun Yong Park, losing to Kevin Holland, and in his most recent appearance last February, choking out Rodolfo Vieira in one of the more shocking upsets of 2021. And by the eyeball test, one of the more shocking outcomes, in mixed martial arts history. It was the equivalent of Crow Cop getting head kicked by Gabriel Gonzaga. He'll be welcoming Fremd, who is an enemy to my Microsoft Word autocorrect. The 28-year-old Pennsylvania native is 9-2 overall. This will be his debut, as I mentioned. He fought for the LFA middleweight title last year, lost to Gregory Rodriguez, who is now in the UFC. Albert Duraev had been scheduled to face Hernandez here. He withdrew on just like a week ago, and Fremd steps in. He's somebody that I at least probably thought would end up in the UFC or at least on the Contender Series sometime this year anyway, so this just speeds it up a little bit. He is the slight underdog. He's plus 150, where Hernandez is minus 180 as the favorite. Keith, do you like this fight better than the Duraev fights or about the same, and who do you have winning?
I'd say about the same. What I do like about it is I like seeing a guy that's kind of been on the cusp for a while get his chance. So I like that. I've interviewed Josh Fremd before. He's a really nice dude. So it's always good to see that. So sorry, I clear my throat for a second.
We talk about bias sometimes. Like, do you ever find yourself biased to like fighters that you interview? Like, just I can't help but wish a fighter well if they give me their time.
Yeah, I'd say very few though, because generally speaking, from my experience, and And I said, I've really gotten away from doing interviews. I probably said that I should try to do more in the future. It's just a time thing for me. I do enjoy doing them. It's just one of these things. You got to pick your battles, and I like doing tape study. I really do like doing tape study. I feel like I'm one of the few people. I feel like I really study guys, and I just enjoy doing that. So that obviously takes away my opportunity from doing interviews. No, that's not what you asked me. But
also, you're a police detective, so you are used to interviewing people and not getting an emotional attachment one way or the other in a way that I'm not. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. So there's definitely some people. It depends. It really depends. Like some people I'll end an interview with, and it's over. Hey, see you later, man. It could be just things I have going on in life. They have going on in life, then rush. And then there's other times you might ask them like, hey, you said this, and you start. I don't want to ask this on the record. You start talking, and then you end up talking to someone for like I remember talking to Cody Brundage for like a legit an hour afterwards, just about life, and he started telling me about how he met Amanda and this and that, and it was just like it's a cool dude. So like I root for him, you know. I should say this. I root for him to be successful in life, but I might not necessarily root for him in a fight because I'm not rooting against his opponent.
Right.
But there's 3 or 4 people that I've really just. Kayla Harrison is my favorite person to interview. I've interviewed her 3 or 4 times, and every time I'm like, man, I love to talk to Kayla Harrison. And she's also one of these ones that will talk to you for like 25 minutes afterwards and not be in a rush and like.
Which is remarkable for somebody that, I mean, frankly, does a lot of interviews ahead of her fights.
Yeah, does a lot of interviews, is a mega star. But every one of her interviews, she's always on. Like she's never like I've never seen her do an interview and it's like a bad interview. Austin Vanderford, say what you want about him. Austin Vanderford is the nicest guy in MMA. Like super personal, sees you at press conferences. Hey Keith, how are you? You know, just recognizes you, just like a super, nice dude. Like those are the guys you root for. But generally speaking, like I know that obviously some of the listeners might have interaction with fighters. I'm assuming most of them haven't. My general idea from fighters is that 95% of them are just great people.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's probably 2 or 3 dicks, but.
No, I mean, the most divisive person I've probably interviewed on a professional basis would be Dylan Dennis, and he was perfectly pleasant.
Oh, dude.
Fun. Yeah.
It's so funny you say that because I did an event at Bellator. It was one of these ones where they had like all their fighters, and it was one of the ones. It was like 25 fighters. It was like an hour long. You're not gonna get to talk to all of them. And I got in line to Dylan Dennis. I was the very first person in line. And he sat there, and I think he wasn't ready because I was the very first person. He didn't put the Dylan Dennis gimmick on. And if I could find it, it was when I was covering it with Cage Side Press. If you see the interview, you'll see completely different. It's only a 5-minute interview because there's people behind me waiting. You'll see a completely different side of. Like I see people saying like, "Wow, like Dylan's very likable in this," because I don't know, he just like forgot to turn it on.
That's
and then
so
by
funny.
like the second or third one, he's like, "Oh yeah," and then he did it. It was for his second fight. It was his second MMA fight. I don't remember he fought, but it was like 3 years ago because he hasn't fought since. But yeah, back to what fight are we talking about? Oh, Anthony Hernandez and
Josh Fremd.
Josh Fremd. Yeah, let's talk about this fight. Fun fight. I'll say that. So you asked me, do I feel like I like the fight more? I think it's stylistically, it could be a pretty fun fight. I think they're both pretty evenly matched. Hernandez, he's not a great athlete, which kind of seems like a little bit of a theme I've been saying for this card. But he also just makes up for it by just being super aggressive. He hits hard. I say he's an okay wrestler, but a weak defensive wrestler. But he has some serious, like he has some submission skills, and I understand that Adolfo Vera was really tired and this and that. But it wasn't just caught him on when he had him in Adolfo a couple times. He almost had like an inverted triangle at the end of the first round on Adolfo Vera. Like, yes, I understand that they had a straight jiu-jitsu match, Adolfo would kill him. Like, yeah, I get that. But I'm still gonna give it. That's really impressive. Now, of course, like he loves his guillotines, he loves his anacondas, and right away, it's really hard to submit him. Adolfo Vera took him down, couldn't submit him. I know you can say, yeah, Marcus Perez submitted him. You get caught. It happens. But Anthony Hernandez, his stock really rose for me in that fight because of that. Because there's still a mental side of that game where you're a huge underdog. You got put in a bad position, and you didn't mentally break, and that's impressive to me. And then his good get up game. Like he made the reason why Rodolfo Vera got tired is he made him work. He kept working back to his feet. Good cardio. His cardio is a weapon, which is really impressive. Now moving on to Fremd. Fremd's a Factory X guy. He's taking the fight on really short notice, and he's really big for the weight class. So the cut, I wonder how much weight he has to cut because he's always been a kind of a bigger middleweight. But being that he's on a good team, I'm assuming he's probably pretty prepared for this. On the feet, pressure striker, busy jab, good straight punches down the pipe. I like his check left hook. I don't like that he lacks a little bit of power for a guy who's so big, and I think it's because he throws a lot of arm punches. He's more of a guy he just wants to beat you with volume instead of stepping in and really getting the technique. He also for a guy he's been on LFA and he's been on some really good regional scenes. He's been rocked a couple of times in fights that he'd win and you look on paper and he's got the submission win, but he was rocked 30 seconds over, which I don't like. He also, being that he's a taller guy, he's got long legs. He doesn't check leg kicks, big targets for him. As far as the ground, good entries. I say he's a pretty decent wrestler. He's very physically strong, especially against the hips, and he's got 3 submissions. So, I'm sorry, who'd you say was the favorite?
Hernandez is the favorite. He's minus 180, Fremd around plus 150.
Yeah, I thought you said that. The reason why I said that, I think this should be pretty much a pick 'em fight. I am picking Hernandez. I like his output and I like the power Hernandez has. I like that cardio is a weapon, and he's just a tough out for someone who's taking the fight on just days' notice. If Fremd had a full camp, I might have actually picked him, but I'm worried about the weight cut. I don't know how much weight he's cutting, but that's a little concerning. And then someone like Hernandez, who's shown that he can tire people out, and then Fremd has been caught with big shots before, and Hernandez showed he has that power. So I'm going to say Hernandez wins by second round TKO.
Awesome. This is one where I'm going to differ with you a little bit, not in my pick for the fight, because spoiler, I am going with Hernandez here as well. But I was surprised that the odds weren't a little wider, and for the very same reason that you brought up here. Fremd is a big middleweight. That was kind of the first thing I noticed about him when he first cropped up on my radar. Walks out. He's a 6'3", 6'4" guy that he's not skinny. He does not have the Israel Adesanya build. He's got some muscle on his frame. He looks like a guy that probably does have a substantial weight cut. And
he looks like Forrest Griffin, like a Forrest Griffin build.
Yes.
But Forrest Griffin was a 205 pounder, but yeah.
But that's wider shoulders than you would expect from that tall a guy for the weight class. Yeah, completely agree. And that on short notice against the guy in Hernandez that, as you mentioned, he's a comeback guy. He's a bit of a builder. He is definitely a weaponized cardio guy. Both of his UFC wins, not just the Piera fight where the whole crux of the fight was Piera gassing out horribly and then Hernandez just having his way with him, but also when he beat Jun-Yong Park, he lost the first round of that fight, came on strong in the second, and all of a sudden things just clicked for him that had not in the first round. He got really impressive, emphatic takedown, moved to the position he wanted to set up his front headlock and got the anaconda choke. This is one of those fights where it's the classic short notice thing where Fremd might have a round to either finish this fight or do enough damage that, he's socked away, either a 10-8 round or really compromise Hernandez, because Hernandez is really going to start rolling downhill as this thing goes along. Fremd has yet to lose by submission, but I'm going to pick that here, actually. I think later in the fight, even if he lost the first round, Hernandez is going to be rolling downhill on him. He'll be able to get the takedowns, even if he wasn't able to early on. Might hurt him with strikes on the ground, but is going to wrap up some kind of submission. Give me Anthony Hernandez by third round submission in this one. Next up, we head to the lightweight division for a matchup between Vinc Pichel and Mark O. Madsen. Pichel, the 39-year-old Californian, is 14-2 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC out of the 15th season of The Ultimate Fighter, where he made the semifinals and lost to eventual runner-up Al Iaquinta. He is on a 3-fight winning streak, That's the good news. The bad news is that that 3-fight winning streak is spread over 3 years because Vinc Pichel. He is on that streak. He's defeated Roosevelt Roberts, Jim Miller, and most recently Austin Hubbard, over whom he took a unanimous decision at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Gastelum last August. He'll be taking on Madsen. The 37-year-old fighter from Denmark is a perfect 11-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is a perfect 3-0 since joining the UFC as a former standout in Cage Warriors. He has beaten Danilo Belluardo, Austin Hubbard, and Clay Guida, over whom he took a split decision at that same Cannonier versus Gastelum card where Pichel last competed. Odds on this one are fairly close, but Pichel is a slight favorite. He's minus 145. Madsen, you can get at plus 120, plus 125 or so. Keith, I don't think either of these guys would probably appreciate me characterizing them this way, considering that they're both still active fighters and they probably think their best accomplishments are still ahead of them. But I see both of these guys as kind of what might have been stories. Because Vinc Pichel, when he is in the cage, like I said off the top, obviously the resume isn't there to say, yeah, Vinc Pichel is a top 10 or top 15 fighter, but by the eyeball test and the people he can beat and then the people that he loses to, he's a top 15 fighter on talent. I mean, in his entire UFC run, he's 7-2. He's lost to Rustam Khamzat and Gregor Gillespie, and in both cases, it's because he got out-wrestled badly. Like, Khamzat just spiked him on his head and then punched him out. Gillespie took him down like 15 times in 6 minutes and then finally got the wrestler sub, the arm triangle from the top. Aside from that, he's beaten some good guys. And this current streak over Roosevelt Roberts, Jim Miller, Austin Hubbard, those 3 wins, those kind of position you in that 15 to 20 range. Like that's where you are if you can beat those 3 guys. His problem has always been injury, to the point where, yeah, he has 9 fights. This is his 10th fight in the UFC, and he's been in the UFC for 10 years. He's almost exactly a fight per year guy. It's crazy. Great. And now he's 39 years old. And while he still looks as good as ever every time he gets in the cage, I mean, he's the equivalent of like the grandma's car that's like, it's a 30-year-old car, but it's completely cherry because she only drove it to church on Sunday. So it's got like 6,000 miles on it. Maybe that's his body. Just, there's like that much less wear and tear. And then he's taking on Madsen.
He's got the 2002 Toyota Camry just sitting there.
6,000 miles on it. Yeah. It's like, and then Madsen on the other side, obviously, he'll let you know that he's a former Olympic silver medalist if and he's only had 10 fights period, and he's 37 just because he was such a late starter because he allowed his Olympic career to cut into his early 30s. Both of these guys, in terms of skills, in terms of just physical gifts, I think they had the capacity to do a lot more. And in each case, it never quite panned out for a variety of different reasons. But it gives us a pretty interesting fight, this Saturday at UFC 273. How do you see this one playing out? And for the winner, how much realistic upside do you think there is left?
So I'm going to say there really isn't any upside. I still don't even with a win for either one of these guys, I don't view them as a top 15. And it's not a knock on these guys. It's just that, as you mentioned, that division is so low. I mean, you can go 50 deep before where's the line of the cutoff of who's really good. And yeah, Vinc Pichel, I interviewed him a long time ago when he first made his long return. And he told me the reason why he was out, and God, this is just terrible. He was working as a tow truck driver and hurt his back changing a tire or something. And it was like a workers' comp deal and all this. And, probably the insurance company saying, wait, you're a fighter on the side, kind of thing. But just imagine just imagine for another second it's another sport and Serena Williams is missing Wimbledon because she was stocking.
She has to work as a tow truck driver.
Yeah, she's stocking shelves at BJ's and hurt her back or something, or it's just a crazy sport that we have. And then Marco Madsen, it's the same thing that happens with all high level wrestlers, that they pursue it too far. I mean, it's the same thing kind of with Sarah McMahon, not too as extreme as Mark Madsen, but I think recently, of the last couple of weeks, Kyle Snyder, who is one of the greatest American wrestlers ever, He's a maybe 3-time NCAA. I'm not sure. He might be a 3-time NCAA champion. He's a Hodge Trophy winner. He is a Olympic gold medalist and Olympic silver medalist. And he's a guy that has hinted at going to MMA, and he's an MMA fan. He's one of the guys he offered to train Conor McGregor in wrestling for his Khabib fight. And recently asked, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to focus on wrestling now. Maybe it's something I do later on. And it's like, at that point, dude, don't do it. Just continue to do wrestling so you can't wrestle anymore. And then just do clinics, maybe go into coaching, do whatever. Open up your own club. I mean, he's set for life anyways. Like, he's going to have a very good life. Guys like Bo Nickel, who they make that one run at the Olympics, don't make the team and then they move on. Those are the guys that have a chance. But the guys who stick around until they can't wrestle anymore, you can't transition to MMA just because you can't wrestle at the highest level anymore. It's not easy. And that's kind of what happened, Marco Madsen. Like, your level of wrestling is going to carry you up to a certain point, but the athleticism, the chin, the cardio, all those things will start to fade. And I think that's kind of what we have with Marco Madsen. And then and I'm not as high on the run of Vinc Pichel as you are. It's a good run. I don't know if it's beating Austin Hubbard and Jim Miller. And
I think I probably overrated his accomplishments because I picked wrong against him all those times. So I've over-adjusted the other way.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. So Pichel, what I like about Pichel is, even though I pick against him, he's like my kind of guy. He's the guys that I love watching. I love watching the guys that aren't the greatest athletes who just make up with just pure toughness. I mean, he's a high-pressure output fighter, just like stalking his foe. I wouldn't say he's a poor athlete, but I say he's like a minus athlete, but just makes up with just mental toughness. He has a lot of defensive flaws. He's not too fast. He's kind of flat-footed. He gets hit a lot due to lack of head movement. But he sets up his power shots by throwing out feints. Gets in the pocket. He's got some thudding leg kicks. He likes to get the clinch and just kind of grind on his opponents, wear him out. Will drop down for a takedown, though I wouldn't say he's a wrestler, but he can drop down for a takedown. Isn't much a submission threat, but he can lay some good hammers on top. And then if you hold him down, he's just going to work. Like, you take him down, he's going to work. If Mark Madsen takes him down, he's going to work. Like, why did Gregor Gillespie have so many takedowns? Because Vinc Pichel kept working back to his feet. Now, Marco Madsen, you mentioned 37. So the floor is just going to collapse at any time. Like, it could be this fight, and it probably will be this fight. He isn't technical on the feet, but he's like a good enough athlete that he has such a strong base and hips and power to him that he is a little bit of a threat. He's more of a threat on the feet than he gets credited to. He really sits on his punches. He makes the mistake of throwing the same combination over and over again. Like, he's learned, like, oh, this is my basic striking. Especially he loves his overhand right. He's heavy on his front foot, which makes him open to kicks. He often ducks, and I pointed this out before, Austin Hubbard almost put him out for this. He often ducks his head to the same spot over and over again. So, like, a high kick on that side or something, uppercut there, it's going to put him out. But obviously, he's the elite of the elite. He won a silver medal in the Olympics, which is an incredible accomplishment. Great entries, insanely strong. He gets hold of one inch of your leg, and there's a very good chance you're going flying. He does lose a little bit of energy by going for these big throws. But he's got some of the best. When I've been watching him in his fights, he's got some of the best hip control, both defensively. If sometimes he gets in these positions where you're clinched with him, and an opponent wants to make a name for himself and take down the silver medals, and they go for a takedown. And his hip control is incredible. The way he kind of sprawls him with his hips, but also just loading an opponent. He gets a block, he just loads you up on his hip. He uses those hips to turn his opponent, get him flying in the air. It's really impressive. Also got obviously the inside trips. He stays absolutely glued to his opponents when he's in close and he's got a position. On top, he's strong. He's still learning a submission game, but we saw him recently like attacking for Darth chokes and kind of like wrestling type submission, like a modified half Nelson, and kind of going with those illegal moves, go for a full Nelson, stuff that's illegal in wrestling. He still needs to learn the sub game overall, though. And the concerning thing is that he tired out in his last two fights, and I don't expect at 37 to suddenly get better. I'm gonna regret this one. I'm gonna pick against Pichel again because he keeps winning, but I can see Madsen just doing the same thing that Gillespie did: take him down, hold him down, take him down, hold him down. He might not have the cardio that Gillespie does to do that. That's the really concerning thing. But he's of the two, he's the even more decorated wrestler than Gillespie. It's shocking if that is, because Gillespie's insanely high. I just, I hate going against. I have this like soft spot for high level credentialed wrestlers. Is a very good chance that Madsen wins the first round, gets tired out by Pichel. Pichel wins, but I'm gonna say I'll give Madsen another victory. Madsen by decision.
Awesome. I see the dynamic exactly the same way you do. I do fall on the other side of it here, and it's partly watching Pichel's just you said, like, he has this relentless get up game. So I expect Madsen to take him down, especially in the early going, early, often, and easy. The question will be, when Pichel just keeps getting up, doesn't just concede the round and just stay on his back and mess around and stall, how Madsen's cardio will look. Because while he is a more credentialed wrestler than Gregor Gillespie, he's also older and bigger and like has an actual weight cut where Gillespie probably fights at his walking weight at 155. Although it's not quite a fair comparison because, Jim Miller is 317 years old, just watching Miller win the first round against Pichel and then just gas out, and watching Pichel pull away in the second or third, that's never left me either because I picked Miller in that one. Give me Pichel by decision, and I really do just see this as the flip side of the coin of how you're seeing it. I expect Madsen's gonna have a lot of success with his wrestling early on, and that part of it's probably just gonna get harder and harder for him as he goes. Next up, the welterweights take the cage as it is Mickey Gall versus Mike Malott. Gall, the 30-year-old New Jersey native, is 7-4 overall. He is 6-4 since joining the UFC out of Dana White's looking for a fight as part of the whole get CM Punk opponent type sweepstakes that you might remember from a few years back. At any rate, he has alternated wins and losses for his last 8 fights. Most recently, he's coming off a loss to Alex Morono at UFC on ESPN Font versus Aldo last December. Before that, he had beaten Jordan Williams by first-round submission, and you go back like that, he has alternated wins and losses going all the way back to his win over Sage Northcutt in December of 2016, if you want to know how long it's been. He will be welcoming to the UFC Mike Malott. The 30-year-old Canadian is 7-1-1 overall. He won via first-round submission on Dana White's Contender Series last October. He guillotined Szymon Smotricki in like 35 seconds. That extended his win streak to 3 in a row. So he'll be carrying that streak into the octagon for his debut. He is the slight favorite to get it done. He's minus 190, Gall plus 160 on the comeback. I talked elsewhere on this card about Daniel Santos having a really sporadic mixed martial arts career. Mike Malott is even worse. Mike Malott debuted 11 years ago and has 9 career fights. He has had several absences of 2 years or longer, and it's...
I heard he's the future of MMA, though.
He's been the future of MMA several times, probably.
That was an inside joke.
Yeah, that's an inside joke. This really should have been one of the programs that we just left the tape running in between segments, because there have been some wild asides in between these things. I'm interested in this fight. I mean, my interest is mild in this fight. I don't think either of these guys has a huge upside in such a crowded division as welterweight, but I'm interested because Mike Malott at his best is kind of an opportunistic grappler. You look at his record, you watch his fights. He has a lot of quick finishes, and more recently, they are of the quick submission variety. I mean, against Smotricki on the Contender Series, he literally just grabbed a front headlock off of the first takedown attempt, cranked it up with, the palm-to-palm grip on the side, and Smotricki was tapping out in a panic seconds later. I don't think that's not a path to victory against Mickey Gall. Like, Gall is the underdog here, but Gall has been the underdog, and this is, I think, the 5th fight in a row that he's been the underdog, and he's alternated wins and losses throughout them. He just gets no respect, and I think it's because he looks kind of unassuming, like he just kind of looks boyish and baby-faced and not like a great athlete, and he isn't a great athlete. And for a while, he was one of the lowest level fighters on UFC roster, but he's kind of developed into a decent fighter under the brightest of lights. Like, I can't believe he's 30 years old. Like, it just feels like he should still be like 24. You know, I said off the top, I don't think he's a future top 15 guy, but he's a guy who his job in the UFC is probably safe even if he loses here. And that's not something I would have thought of right off of the Punk and Jackson fights. I figured he'd be gone in a minute. But no, he's turned into just another UFC welterweight, and I mean that as a compliment, because just another UFC welterweight makes you probably one of the 50 or 60 best welterweights on the planet. That's not a bad place to be. I have no idea how this fight is going to play out. I know that you come to the Shill and the Duffy show for the hard hitting analysis, X's and O's. Hopefully Keith has some of it for you, but I'm going with Gall in this one. I think he's just kind of snake charm a lot. Like, Gall he's gotten good at either speeding up or slowing down the pace of fights to his taste and to his best advantage. Like, I think he only loses now to better fighters than himself, doesn't lose bad fights. And, you know, if Malott's best route to victory is to blitz him and hurt him with strikes early and then grab a submission, or hurt him with strikes and then finish it with strikes, I don't think he's going to be able to run through Gall like that. And so I'm taking Gall as the guy who's just has a ton more experience, a ton more recent experience, and more high-level experience. Give me Mickey Gall by decision in the slight upset.
Yeah. So, how many fights is this so far?
This is the 4th fight.
Yeah, I know. I got at least 2 upset picks. You got 2 upset picks already too?
I have 2, Hansen and Gall. You have 3, Hansen. Well, you have 2, Hansen and Madsen. I don't know whether you're taking Gall or Malott here.
Yeah, the same, man. We're going bold. All right. Yeah, I don't want either guy. How about that? Can I just take a pass? No. I think Gall is what he is at this point. I mean, he's 30 years old, which is still shocking to me. He's a low-level UFC talent, but I do think he's a UFC talent. So it's basically saying, rewording the same thing you're saying. I mean that as a compliment. Like, he deserves to be in the UFC. Like, he's never going to fight for a title. He's going to be kind of low on the card. He's going to be – everybody he fights is going to have a decent chance of beating him. You know,
but they'll have to earn it.
They'll have to earn it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I didn't mean to insult you, but I mean, like,
yeah.
he's not like a huge UFC talent, but he's tough. He's not a great athlete. He does have some raw, just physical tools. I mean, he's long and lengthy. He's pretty elusive. He can fight from range, long, straight punches down the pipe. He tries to, like, fade back right hand. He really goes for a lot. But overall, I say he's pretty limited on the feet. He keeps his chin high. He doesn't like being pressured. His worst showing, he lost to Mike Perry when Mike Perry's cornerman was his girlfriend. That was a low point for Mickey Gall. He
got out wrestled by Mike Perry bad.
Yeah,
which was weird.
But, well, in a weird sense, Mike Perry's actually a pretty decent ground fighter. I think I actually think Mike Perry's better on the ground than he is on the feet. He doesn't, going back to Gall, he doesn't have much power. Good kicks, not a strong wrestler, though. As we said this before, last time before. He has that BJJ class wrestling. So, like, an entry is grab a leg and just put your leg behind their leg and hope they trip over it. Like, that stuff that doesn't work against anybody who's not Brian Barberino. Like, he starts every BJJ class on his knees, kind of doing that thing. Weak takedown defense. He makes it worse by jumping for guillotines. On the ground, he is a submission threat, but he isn't the submission threat that the UFC is going to make him sound like. They're going to make him sound like the second coming of Travis Lutter, the Michael Jordan of BJJ. He's physically tough in the sense that he can take a beating. The perfect example is the Mike Perry fight and, like, keep going. But I'm a little worried about his cardio. He faded late against Diego Sanchez in the fight that he said he had kidney failure. Like I always have that in my notes. I'm not taking it out of my notes. But I think based on his recent performances, I think there might be a little truth to that. Like I don't know if he was making an excuse because he's looked his cardio has looked much better. Now, Malott, he's athletic, pretty elusive. I like that he works a double jab, which is an underused thing in MMA. Plus power. He does tend to overthrow his shots, which leaves him open for counters. And I've seen him rock before, and that's because he lacks head movement. But he is also, as you mentioned, a really good submission threat. He's got some back-to-back quick submissions in his last 2 fights. He's a decent wrestler. I think he's a better just overall wrestler than Mickey Gall is. And then he has that like team alpha male guillotine thing going for him. If you make a mistake, you can just snatch that on. So obviously, I've done a lot more tape study of Mickey Gall over the years than I've done Malott, but it's a tough call because Malott is taking a step up of the competition. I'm just not a fan of Gall, so I'm gonna pick Malott. I think he's the better overall athlete. I think he's probably the more technically sound striker, and I think he can at least match Gall on the ground. I don't think either fighter will have a big advantage in the grappling. If Mickey Gall was fighting Bruce Lee, I would take Mickey Gall, but he's not. He's fighting Malott, so give me Malott by decision.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. There's some dissension on this fight, but we both agree that Mickey Gall would beat Bruce Lee because Bruce Lee weighed like 130 pounds. And he's dead. Next up is a bantamweight matchup between Aspen Ladd and short notice replacement Raquel Pennington. Ladd, the 27-year-old Californian, is 9-2 overall. She is 4-2 since joining the UFC as a undefeated standout from Invicta. She is coming off a loss. It was at featherweight against Norma Dumont in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 195 last October. That one, you may remember, made headlines primarily for the interchange between herself and her fiance / head coach, Jim West of MMA Gold Fight Team. Be that as it may, that one was actually at featherweight. Prior to that, she had knocked out Yana Kunitskaya in the 3rd round of their matchup all the way back in December of 2019. So Ladd had been scheduled to face Irene Aldana. Aldana injured, withdraws. Insert your surprise reaction here. In steps Raquel Pennington, steps up as of March 27th. So just a couple weeks notice. The former bantamweight title challenger is 13-8 overall. She is 10-5 since joining the UFC out of the 18th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She is on a 3-fight winning streak, those coming against Marion Renault, Pani Kianzad, and Macy Chasson. The last of those, the Chasson win, was in December at UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Dawkins. Prior to that, she had lost a unanimous decision to Holly Holm all the way back in January of 2020. Pennington, despite being the short notice replacement, is the moderate favorite here. She is -185, Ladd +160 as the underdog. Well, I mean, I alluded to it off the top. The Dumont fight last year was a weird fight. It was at featherweight. It was kind of it had never been intended to be a headliner. It was a flat performance by Ladd. Obviously, I believe she lost all 5 rounds and just never made any adjustments between rounds, either to do something different or at least step on the gas and do the same thing harder. And that led to the brief controversy afterwards, where some people took exception to how Jim West talked to her between rounds, just thought he was berating her or being abusive. I never bought into that, and I think I said this on the recap that night. When we listen to a coach speak to their fighter in between rounds, we're eavesdropping on 1 minute, like literally 60 seconds of conversation between two people who have hundreds or thousands of hours together. They have their own coded language. Like if you listened to me and my wife having some like conversation in the kitchen, you might think something one of us said to the other was really inappropriate, but that's not necessarily the case. We have our own language and our own way of communication that we've developed with each other. I feel that way about the conversation between Ladd and West. Like, unless something is just patently abusive, like, you like called her like a bitch or something between rounds, I'm inclined to let it slide and give the benefit of the doubt to the people who actually like know the whole story. The bigger and I think I said this on the recap as well, if I'm taking Jim West and MMA Gold Fight team to task for anything, it's not for the between rounds talk. It's for this far into her career and with all of her potential still not having gotten the weight cut nailed. Before this foray into featherweight, Aspen Ladd had probably been the most obvious worst case like weight cutter in any of the women's divisions. We're talking about almost every fight. They're bringing out the hoop. She is literally in convulsions on the scale, has to be physically helped off the scale or onto the scale, like collapsing on stage. So when I see her as a slight underdog here, I think a lot of it is because of all these questions that don't necessarily have anything to do with her skills or or her physical gifts. They're just questions of, okay, is she going to make 136 pounds? And if so, what is she going to look like on the scale? And what is she going to function like in the cage? And if your weight cut has made it so that your gas tank might be in question, Raquel Pennington is a horrible person to take on. Like that's about as bad a matchup as you can get for that. Like Pennington, because her title shot against Amanda Nunes was, one of the worst. I think it might have been the worst beatdown of that year. One of the worst, beatdowns of that year, at least. And ironically, one that got her team a little bit of heat for maybe not having thrown in the towel. I think that's kind of like painted at least my perception of her a little bit. And I don't give her credit for being as good as she is. Like this far into her UFC career, who has she lost to? Jessica Andrade, Holly Holm twice, Jermaine Durandamy, and Amanda Nunes. It's literally nothing but champs.
Yeah.
Like she has lost to nothing but champs. And the Jessica Andrade fight was all the way back in 2014. So, and it was a split decision. But Raquel Pennington is still like too much.
Let me ask you a question. So, curiosity. Prime Raquel Pennington, prime Ronda Rousey. Who wins?
Pennington.
Tough.
I mean, because
I'm just throwing it out there. Like, that's the whole point is like that's how good she is.
Yeah. In hindsight, what were Ronda Rousey's wins? They were fast blitz submissions and a couple of fast blitz knockouts. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them in the first round. Nobody does that to Raquel Pennington.
No. And
Raquel Pennington is the grimiest gamer. Mm-hmm. Grimiest gamer in the women's divisions, one of the grimiest gamers, period. Just the whole thing about the Nunes fight. She never stopped coming forward and trying to win that fight, even when she was taking just a record-setting shellacking from, at the time, maybe the most terrifying fighter in the sport.
Even when she didn't want to come forward anymore and told her corner to stop it. Yeah.
But, hey, once they pushed her out.
Yeah, she didn't change her style.
And she is still just too much for anyone not at that Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, Amanda Nunes level. Like Macy Chasson, Pannie Khamzat, and Marion Renault were probably all three of them at least top 15 bantamweights at the time she beat them. And she handled all three of them, no problem. She's she's well-rounded. Like she's a high volume striker with, a basic arsenal of kicks, punches, and combinations. Like there's nothing exotic there, but she throws good volume. She continues to throw volume late in fights. Not a ton of power, but almost nobody in that division has a ton of power. A decent wrestler offensively and defensively, and always thought her grappling was a little underrated in just how opportunistic and how solid it was. all of that for me spells bad news for Aspen Ladd. Pennington is a fairly physically strong fighter. I don't think Ladd's going to be able to just come out and bully her, like just, either hurl her to the ground takedowns that she's accustomed to against a lot of fighters. And if she does use a lot of kind of like brute force work in the wrestling or in the clinch, I think that's going to lead her to gas out even quicker than she might otherwise. And that plays right into Pennington's that plays right into Pennington's strengths as well. After seeing Ladd last 5 rounds against Dumont, I'm not going to pick Pennington to get the finish here. Pennington usually wins by decision, but I think it's going to look pretty easy and pretty basic and pretty straightforward. I'm not even sure Ladd wins the first round. I like, give me Pennington by a decision where she wins all 3 rounds and just kind of sends Ladd back to the drawing board and makes her look kind of basic.
Yeah. So, this is an interesting fight, and I agree with a lot of things you're saying there about Pennington is just criminally underrated over the years. I haven't got the credit, and I get why. Like, she's not the most pleasing style. She's you mentioned definition of like a grimy grinder. She's a bad athlete. Like, do you think Raquel Pennington can do like the hula hoop? Or like do you think Raquel Pennington can like dive into a pool? Like she jumped in the pool, like it'd be a terrible splash, and like, so she's slow, she's flat-footed, but she's so effing tough. Like she's getting close to that Darren Elkins club where, she has some technical skills. So I don't want to ignore that. She's clean. She's a very clean boxer, like tight shots. She's very good in the pocket, unloads in that like mid-range area. She's got a couple of setups. She bobs side to side. She has like a ducking, looping left hook that she throws. She also likes to do this, or she likes to like dip to her right, so it looks like she's going down to the body, and then throws like a left hook around the defenses. Like just little things she does well. But she can take a beating. Like, other than Amanda Nunes, if you're not Amanda Nunes, she's going to keep coming. She's going to walk through your punches. She's going to stay and she's going to fight her style. Like, she's never not in her fight. Like, other than maybe Holly Holm, like maybe the Holly Holm fight, and that's just because Holly Holm just had such great footwork. And even Holly Holm beat her by using her footwork to get to the clinches and get to the positions where Holly Holm was winning those instead of her winning them. And Holly Holm's a grossly underrated grappler. She's very physically strong, as you mentioned. She gets stronger, it seems like, as other people fade. Her game just keeps rolling harder each minute. She likes to get to the clinch, chest to chest, just lean on her opponent, just grind and sign, outwork into the foe, which is like little annoying things she'll do. She'll punch it to the legs, the shoulder shrug, put the head on the opponent's chin and kind of just moving their head around, foot stomp, like whatever. Like, she just does those annoying things. She's hard to take down, but she's very good at just pinching you, distracting you, and then like dropping. And when I'm pinching her against the fence, not actually pinching against the fence. I mean, maybe she does. Like, I wouldn't surprise her. She might have a little Tim Elliott in her. Tim Elliott, I don't know if Tim Elliott has done that one yet. We have to challenge Tim Elliott to pinch somebody, or maybe do a noogie or something. She's good at like pinching them against the fence and then like dropping down a leg and like running a pipe, or just like lifting a high crotch and getting the fight to the ground. And she is a submission threat, but her submission threats are like in those scrambles, grabbing and guillotines, especially in like a standing position. And she has the cardio to go like hard, grueling 15 minutes. Like, she's not going to stop. Ladd, I've always thought about Ladd as this like ultra young prospect who has plenty of years to develop. Then all of a sudden I look, I'm like, holy shit! Like, this girl's 27. She's in her peak years now, and I thought she looked terrible, like beyond terrible, against Norma Dumont. Now, it might be that Norma Dumont is just way better than her. That could be it. It could be perhaps that ACL tear that she was off a while is not fully healed. It could have been moving up a weight. It could have been a bad weight cut, as you mentioned. Like, there's a lot of questions. Yeah. So I'm not sure what I'm seeing, but when I just look at her tape, like her striking is still a work in progress, and it should be more advanced at this point. She's still a little stiff. Um, she does well to keep her punches tight. I like that, but she's kind of slow. She lacks head movement. She does want to close the distance, get into the clinch, where she's got some good clinch takedowns. She'll grind in there. Like this is the position like her and Raquel Pennington likes being comfortable in the clinch, so I think we would expect to see a lot of that. But Ladd wants to get the fight to the ground where she. This is what is Ladd is really good at. She gets on top. She's got some of the scariest ground pound I've seen. Um, I think I said it last time. She has a little bit of that like crazy ex girlfriend in her, where like she gets on top of somebody and she's smashing the opponent like she's smashing like a front car because you came home an hour later than you said you were gonna, and she saw a text from your boss whose name's Tiffany, and she's who's Tiffany? Who's Charlene? And she grabs you by the balls and twists it off. Not that I have that experience, but it's funny that you focus so much on the weight cut thing because that's something that just bothers me. It just really bothers me how bad she looks at weigh-ins. She's going to look bad at this weigh-ins. She probably should just continue to move up to 145, but she looked bad at 145 weigh-ins too. So it's not like that's not a solution. This is an interesting fight. Both fighters are going to want to get in those close quarters. I don't know if Ladd has a dog on her like I know Pennington does. I'm going to go back-to-back fights and take him who I think is the bigger dog, and I'm going to go with and I'm not talking about the betting underdog. I mean that pit bull in the fight. I think Pennington's going to work around the outside and the striking, and when it gets in close, I think she win that. I think it's going to be a close fight, but give me Pennington by close decision. I will say this. For some reason, if Aspen Ladd's coach calls her a bitch, I'm going to be really pissed that I'm missing the recap show this week.
Just a bunch of people at the ViStar Veterans Memorial Coliseum are going to get out to find their cars have been keyed, and it's all by the same key. Just Aspen Ladd. Next up, it is the heavyweights as Jairzinho Rozenstruik takes on Marcin Tybura. Rozenstruik, the 34-year-old Surinamese kickboxer, is 12-3 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC. Debuted in the UFC with 4 straight wins that brought him all the way into the title picture. He has alternated wins and losses since then. He's coming off a loss via unanimous decision to Curtis Blades at UFC 266 last September. Prior to that, he knocked out Augusto Sakai at the end of the first round in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 189 in June. He'll be taking on Tybura. The 36-year-old Pole is 22-7 overall. He is 9-6 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Alexander Volkov at UFC 267 last October. That ended a 5-fight win streak for Tybura that had seen him beat Sergey Spivak, Maxime Grishin, Ben Rothwell, Greg Hardy, and Walt Harris. Rozenstruik is the slight favorite here. He's minus 145. Tybura out there at plus 120, plus 125 or so. Keith, it is two guys kind of at or near the edges of the heavyweight top 10. Both guys looking to bounce back from losses to top 5 fighters. Who gets it done and how?
Yeah, the first thing that stands out to me is I'm surprised how low on the card this is. Like this fight should be on. If you got to put a heavyweight card on the main card, it should be this fight. It shouldn't be Latifi and Oleinik.
That's okay. You make a good point. And let me just interject. I don't understand why, because even rankings aside, this one is more likely to be an interesting fight, I think. Like, I'm just going to paste in our prediction of Latifi versus Oleinik 2 weeks ago later, but my only sure prediction was that was going to be a miserable fight to watch. Whereas this one we might have something cool happen.
Yeah, unless like Oleinik does something cool, but this could, yeah, I think there could be a stoppage. But this has, I think this has a better chance of being a snoozer than you're saying, based on both style. Like, and Rozenstruik is a very good striker. He's very calm. He's very poised. He's sniping counter striker, but he can be very, very gun shy. Like we saw it against JDS. We saw it against Overeem.
Gone. Cyril
Gone.
Gone was the worst.
Uh, he stands very tall because of that kickboxing style. Doesn't really move his head much. But when he lets his hands go, and that's a big if, he's deadly. Like, he's really fun when he lets his hands go. It's just one of these guys, like, I don't know what it is. Like, he's got to be pushed a little bit. He throws straight punches down the pipe. They're accurate, short shots, not a lot of tells. Works a power jab. He has two of my, like, favorite knockouts in recent history. Because he has power in both hands. The first one I think it was just like that shovel uppercut that he threw against Overeem, where his lip exploded and went to outer space. That's one of my favorite knockouts in history. And another one is that hook that he landed on Sakai. And what I loved about it is you could see the intelligence of his striking, because he's slowly stalking. He was kind of not losing, but it was like a closer fight than it should have been. And then he just finally said, oh, yeah, maybe I should stop fighting like how everyone's telling me to not do. Like, hey, maybe I should pick up the pace because everyone sees my potential. And then he starts stalking. And what I love about the punch is he threw a punch to where Sakai was moving to. Like, he didn't aim here, he aimed there. And Sakai stepped right into the shot perfectly timed. And that's what high-level strike. That's things like Petr, who's on this card, will do. Israel Adesanya will do. And Rozenstruik has that type of ability. As far as kicks, though, I like he has this like little twist in his hips that really kind of turns his kicks so they come out quick. Goes to the calves. But his Achilles heel is his defensive wrestling. His defensive wrestling is really bad. He struggles to get back up. He's put on his back. And then offensive wrestling, it's just non-existent. He doesn't wrestle. Now move over to Tybura. Tybura is pretty well-rounded. And Tybura is one of these guys, he's kind of grown on me over the years, where I'm starting to come around on him, where I probably wasn't as high on him as he probably should have been. He's got high output. He's one of these guys where he just kind of jumps out of the page. He's a lot faster and a lot more athletic than I always thought of him as. I thought he was more of a plotting guy, and it's just not really the case. Now, I wouldn't say he's a great athlete. I wouldn't say that. But he makes up for it by just being technically sound and intelligent. He likes to stalk his opponent where he backs them up towards the fence. And he doesn't like when he gets pressured back. But when he's moving forward, he can be very effective. And he's very smart in the way he does it. Like, he'll push kick his opponent back, using keep kick, long things that kind of make them want to step back away from that range. And then he uses his striking to either one or two things. They're trapped against the cage, so you kind of lose the escape routes, which is a huge thing. That's why, like the big no-no of boxing is when you're in the corner, because you lose your escape routes. It's kind of the same thing. Now, obviously, MMA, it's a little different because you have a circle, but the whole point is you can't escape back, you can't fade back, certain things you can't do. You kind of have only two outs now instead of, like, L-stepping is gone, like all the little things you can't do. So that's one, but also, obviously, it's if you want to close the distance, get the clinch, that's much easier when someone's pressed against the cage. So he'll use his striking to close the distance. When he closes the distance, he'll just grind. Like, he doesn't have to get the takedown right. He'll just grind against the fence, work an underhook, lean on his opponent. He wants a grueling fight because he likes to just wear his opponent out. He'll drop down a single, kind of like run a pipe or do like a high crotch takedown. If you throw a kick, he'll catch a kick and just bull rush you down. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's got some heavy top pressure. He's got 6 submission wins. So, as far as prediction goes, this is your classic striker versus grappler. What I don't like is that Rozenstruik can be really gun shy, and he can easily back up towards the fence, which is just a setup for Tybura's entries, where Tybura wants to fight. I see Tybura closing distance, getting the fight to the ground, holding him down for a long period of time. And I see him getting a submission late in the second round. Give me Tybura by second round submission, which is surprising. This is really surprising to me that Tybura is the underdog. I expect him to be a 2-1 favorite.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw it as well, but the odds are what they are. So if you agree with this, there might be some value there. I see this fight largely the same way you do, and I do think that the real big battleground here is Tybura's takedowns against Rozenstruik's defensive wrestling. I'm with you in that I underestimated and discounted Tybura for too long. In fact, I mean, we made a joke out of it at my expense last year because he was on a 5-fight winning streak and I had picked against him in all 5 of those fights, and just apparently needed to learn my lesson. Alexander Volkov was a bridge too far for him, but I think Rozenstruik is kind of tailor-made for him to do well against. I still remember Tybura just effortlessly shooting a double leg on Greg Hardy, scooping him up and dumping him. And this is Greg Hardy. I mean, he was never a great fighter, but he effortlessly pancaked takedowns from like Juan Adams, a former Division I college wrestler. But Tybura, ducked under a punch, scooped him up with a double, and like planted him hard. And that was the beginning of the end. I can see him doing something like that to Rozenstruik, and I think he's going to have ample opportunity to try. For the reason that you mentioned, that Rozenstruik, he's become deliberate almost to his own detriment. Like, he debuted in the UFC with some fast knockouts. I mean, you can't be too deliberate when you're knocking people out in 9 seconds and 23 seconds. But really, since the JDS fight, I agree that he's become almost a little too patient. With Gall, it was really our first glimpse of Ciryl Gane just really snake charming somebody. I was actually going to pick it exactly the same as you, the Tybura by 2nd round submission. Just to mix things up, I'm going to say Tybura by 2nd round TKO on the ground. But I think unless Rozenstruik lands something early, catches Tybura on the way in, and gives him really something to think about, or hurts him and finishes him, I think it's going to be mostly one-way traffic. I think Tybura is going to be able to get the takedown on Rozenstruik. And if he gets a takedown in the first round, that might be it for that round. He might just be able to park there for the rest of the time, just keeping Rozenstruik on the defensive and wearing him out.
Yeah. How confident are you on this pick? Because I'm pretty confident.
It's the most confident of my upset picks, that's for sure.
Okay. So if you're confident like us, like, get the bet in now, because the line's probably going to change, especially if Yanni the Great puts a little sprinkle out there, as he likes to say. If he sprinkles something out there, the line might change. But if you're with me and Ben, get your bet in now. But please, obviously, bet responsibly.
Bet responsibly. Like, we never want you to riot, and we never want you to bet your rent or your kids like college education. So
that's up for telling you to make a bet.
Yeah. We head to the welterweight division as Garry takes on Darian Weeks. Garry, the 24-year-old Dubliner, is a perfect 8-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 1-0 in the UFC, having made a successful debut at UFC 268 last November, where he knocked out Jordan Williams with just 1 second left in the first round. He is taking on Weeks. The 28-year-old Missouri native is 5-1. Overall, he is 0-1 in the UFC. He stepped up on short notice to face Brian Barberena at UFC on ESPN Fought versus Aldo last December. Lost a unanimous decision, but again, he had stepped up on, I think, less than a week's notice for that one. So, gets something of a mulligan there. Nonetheless, the bookmakers do not think it's likely he's going to get back on track here, as he is one of the bigger underdogs on the card. Garry is minus 360 right now, Weeks plus 280. Keith, I could make all sorts of easy jokes and punchlines about a guy whose nickname is the future, but Garry, I mean, is the future now. We were talking just between segments about how any Irish fighter who comes into the UFC at this point with any kind of spark to him, there's a built-in interest in, well, is this the next Conor McGregor, or even like a fragment of the next Conor McGregor in someone that we can make into a star? Is this the guy?
I mean, he's got the personality. He's got the athleticism. He's got the looks. He's young. Like, there's a lot of things you got to like about him if you're the UFC as far as promotion goes. As far as this fight goes, this is a good test for him in his second fight in the UFC. He's a great athlete. He's long and lengthy. He's kind of like a controlled pressure fighter. Like, he's more of a, he'll stalk you down, but not killing you with volume, kind of picking his shots as he goes. Uses feints well to draw attacks. Good head movement. He likes to counter strike. Nice jab. Throws a lot of jabs. He does make the mistake of dropping his hands a little bit, kind of give himself a big target. Good kicks, calf kicks, fast head kick. He's got a judo. I think he's a judo black belt. So if you get cross sparkling, he can take you down with trips and stuff. Strong wrestling, heavy top pressure, good ground and pound. he likes to attack the head in scrambles, Darce chokes, things like this. He kind of he's a scramble guy, but he gets himself in some weird positions with that. Like I go back to like when I was watching regional fights on like the Jack Grant fight. He had his back taken multiple times in that fight, which I don't like. But again, he's so young; those are adjustments that he can easily make. And he also showed off in that fight that he has the gas tank to go hard for 25 minutes. So I don't expect him to gas out now. Weeks took his fight with Brian Barberino fight on like days' notice. I want to point that out. And that fight, I went there and made decisions, and everyone gave it for Barberino. But there was a whole bunch of 29-28 scorecards. And I don't know if you remember that fight. It was very close. The first round was a very close fight round. Most people gave it to Barberino, could go either way. Second round, most people gave it to Weeks. And third round was super close. I actually thought Weeks was winning it. And then he got caught with a big shot with about 10 seconds left in the fight. I actually think Barberino won the fight with 10 seconds left. So Darian Weeks is really close to just walking pretty much off the street on days' notice, taking on Brian Barberino and winning, in my opinion. He's a wrestle boxer. He has some pro boxing experience, high output, a bit unorthodox with his striking. That kind of throws from wide angles, has a little bit of like a herky-jerky style to his game. He lacks movement in that sense, though. Like he's more of a, I shouldn't say herky, more of a bob and weaving kind of guy. He doesn't move like laterally or straight back and forth. He's more of a stand your ground and try to like counter you, which is going to be interesting, being that both guys seem to be maybe a little bit of counter striking game. He has he has some pretty decent pop in his hands. A nice check left hook I like. I'd say he has plus power. I like that he throws a lot of teep kicks. He just stays busy with teep kicks. So instead of sitting back and like he'll like feint and then he'll throw a teep kick and try to get you to react to those two. And those just score points, which I like. Doesn't check leg kicks though. Barberino had a lot of success in the fight with that. He can shoot for a takedown. He also has some body lock takedowns. He took Brian Barberino down a lot, like very easily. But it's one of these ones, like, I'm not sure how good of a wrestler he is, because Matt Brown, who's not a wrestler, easily took down Brian Barberino. Like, everybody takes down Brian Barberino. So it's like, yeah, so I'm not, with the same foot sweep like 5 times. But he struggled to keep Brian Barberino down. Again, I'm going to give him a pass on that too, because everyone struggles to keep Brian Barberino down. So I didn't really learn too much about his ground game. A part that's a little concerning, but also maybe a little bit pleasing, is that he gassed a little bit against Barberino, which is obviously disturbing, but he took the fight on days' notice. And what I liked about him, though he even gassed and he slowed down, he was visibly tired. He fought hard. He was still throwing. He was still moving forward, even though he was breathing extremely hard. And he was in a dogfight for the entire 15 minutes, which I almost think it's a positive that he showed that he has that in him. So as far as prediction goes, what'd you say? Like the line was like negative what?
Minus 360 for Garry.
Negative 360. I think this is a much tougher fight for Garry than people think. Garry is the way better athlete. He's way more polished. He has a way higher ceiling of these two fighters. But the reason why Weeks was in such an entertaining fight with Barberino is Barberino needs that guy who's going to brawl it out, be a dog with him, like we just had with Matt Brown. And Weeks has that kind of dog in him. He showed that. I have picked a bunch of underdogs on this card. Why the hell stop now? I think he's going to outwork Garry. I think this is going to be a fun back and forth fight. I say he might mix in some takedowns. And you know what? This could be one of these picks where I look terrible. Garry schools on him. People are going crazy, call him the next champion. Especially at that age, it's all very possible. This also could be one of those trap fights. And I like Weeks' dog in him. I'm going to say Weeks drops the first round and picks the next two. I say he wins a split decision in an absolute war. Give me Weeks in a massive upset pick.
Wow. There you go. That's what you check into this show for. Keith Schillen stepping out on a limb, not me stepping out on a limb. I'm always wrong when I do that. But Keith stepping out on a limb, picking the massive underdog here in Darian Weeks, and telling us that, no, the future is not now. I understand why why you would make that pick. Like the signs are there that this could definitely be a trap fight. Garry is nowhere near a finished product tactically, especially on the ground. You pointed out that he runs undue risk with the way he grapples. That's something that Weeks might be able to take advantage of. I also came away from the Barberena fight feeling better about Weeks, feeling that no, he doesn't have the ceiling of Garry, but I suspect now that he's somebody who's going to prove that he belongs in the UFC and will probably stick. My hope is that if he loses here, he doesn't get cut. But I am going to lean Garry here. I think his raw physical skills are on a different level than Weeks. He is a more complete product, even though Weeks is older. Garry has more experience and it's higher level experience. Even before he came to the UFC, he's fighting people like Rostam Akman, who fought in the UFC and handled him. And while Garry, he runs undue risk on the ground in particular. Like he has in the Jordan Williams fight, it had been a competitive first round. Like I think it was probably Garry's round either way, but just the way that you could tell that like when the 10-second clapper went off, he went, okay, I need to do something to put my stamp on this round so there's no question, and ended up knocking him out. But just, the way on cue, like something from like a movie, he just like, slipped one of Williams's punches, flattened him, and then finished the thing. It's just one of those intangible things that like points towards possible greatness at some point. I don't know if he makes it there, but I do think he makes it past Weeks. Give me Garry, and I'm going to say he gets it done in a second round TKO in a fight that's really fun while it lasts. And again, hopefully another one that leaves Weeks coming away like looking like the kind of solid prospect he is himself. Next up on the UFC 273 main card is a strawweight matchup between Mackenzie Dern and Tecia Torres. Dern, the 29-year-old Brazilian by way of Arizona, or Arizonan by way of Brazil, whichever way you want to put it, is 11-2 overall. She is 6-2 in the UFC. She did lose her last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to Marina Rodriguez in the main event of UFC Fight Night 194 last October. That snapped a 4-fight win streak for her over Hannah Cifers, Randa Marcos, Verna Jandiroba, and Nina Nunes. 3 of those 4 by first-round submission. She'll be taking on Torres. The 32-year-old Floridian is 13-5 overall. She is 11-5 in the UFC as one of the charter members of the strawweight division when it was first introduced. She is on a 3-fight win streak, those being Brianna Fortino back in June of 2020, Sam Hughes in December of 2020, and Angela Hill, over whom she took a unanimous decision at UFC 265 last August. That 3-fight win streak snapped a 4-fight losing streak for her, even if those were against all championship level fighters, or at least top contenders, but that had kind of left her future in the sport in doubt. But she has come roaring back, and she is not quite a favorite here. She is available at even money plus 100, where Dern is minus 120. But for a woman who was all but forgotten or written off in this division just 2.5 years ago, it is a remarkable turn of events. Man, it's kind of fitting that Tecia Torres and Raquel Pennington have been a couple for as long as they have, because all the things you said about Pennington just not being a plus athlete and kind of slow and, just makes the best of her physical tools, none of that can be said about Tecia Torres. She is, she's fast, she's explosive, she's very powerful. Obviously, she's tiny. It's right in the nickname. She is the tiny tornado. But we're talking about a woman who is jacked enough here that the normally extremely classy Angela Hill just kind of threw some shade in the lead up to their fight, like stopping just short of accusing her of using performance enhancing substances. I have no firsthand knowledge on that and don't really care to speculate. But the important part of it is that her physical gifts are such that it's not unreasonable that somebody would think that. She is a physical specimen, and of the kind of 5'1" strawweights out there. You think of your like Loma Lugboonmi types. She's one of the ones where I never go, oh man, I wish there was an atomweight division so she could drop to atomweight, because Tecia Torres is like stacked with muscle and just a compact little dynamo. I think she's going to run into problems here against Dern. It took me a long time to kind of start taking Mackenzie Dern seriously as a mixed martial artist. Like she was kind of proclaimed, the future of the division as soon as she crossed over. And I was legitimately excited that one of the greatest, female grapplers in history crossed over to mixed martial arts so early. Just kind of look at the opposite tracks of her and one of her main rivals in grappling, Michelle Nicolini, where, Nicolini kept on grappling, and a lot of her greatest accomplishments were after her 30th birthday, whereas by the time Dern was 23, she was like, I've really done everything I care to do in grappling. I've won Mundials, I've won Abu Dhabi, I'm going to go fight. And that was exciting. But as far as the actual in-cage product goes, the weight misses were concerning. Of course, the bad one was when she fought Amanda Bobby Brundage, at the time Cooper, back in 2018. It was in Brazil, which is lucky for her because an American commission might have just called this fight off because she blew weight by like 7 pounds. And then she lost to Amanda Ribas, and I was one of the people who kind of probably wrote her off a little prematurely, not as a UFC level fighter, but as maybe a championship level fighter. Then, she went and had a kid, and as happens to probably a lot of us between our early 20s and our late 20s, maybe kind of grew up a little bit. I don't know in what universe, like, having a kid makes it easier for you to manage your weight, but weight has not been a problem for her ever since. She's made weight every time, no question, and has not looked like death on the scale, has not demonstrated any problems with cardio or chin in the cage. I mean, she's only been the distance twice since then, but in neither case was it a problem with her getting gassed out. But I look at the people who beat her, Amanda Ribas and Marina Rodriguez, and in both cases, it's women who could stop or at least slow her takedown assault, and survive and get back up if they did get taken down, and were good enough on the feet to take advantage of her striking. Dern's striking has come along leaps and bounds since she came over from LFA. She was a terrible striker in LFA. She's become a decent striker by the standards of the strawweight division. I wouldn't say she's a below average striker for the division anymore. She's solid. She throws decent volume. She seems to have pretty good natural power on her shots because she doesn't overthrow things, but when she lands, you can tell her opponents feel it. So it's become, it still is a means to an end to let her get her entries and get the fight to the ground, but she's not completely hopeless if she can't get it there. And the Rodriguez fight was a good example of that. She lost the decision. She lost it rightfully, but against one of the best strikers in the division, in Marina Rodriguez, it's not like she was just completely outclassed and thrashed from pillar to post. She just lost a kind of competitive fight. The problem here is that Dern is going to be way bigger than Torres. And if Torres's game plan is going to depend on landing enough strikes on Dern to win rounds, or even, hurt her, but at least landing enough strikes to win rounds while not getting walked into the cage and letting her grab the clinch, or not letting Dern shoot one of her entries, because she will shoot actual, single legs from the outside and then just work from there to, chain different submission or chain different takedown attempts until she can either drag them down or drag them into guard or take their back standing. She's got the kind of Damian Maia stickiness that way. That is a rough thing to ask Tecia Torres to do for at least 2 rounds out of 3. So while I've been really happy to see the resurgence of Tecia Torres in the division, she's generally a really exciting fighter to watch. I think this is going to be a bad matchup for her. I don't know if Dern is going to be able to get her down, early enough in a round or with enough time to work, or in a situation where she can really get her ground game going, because, Torres is capable of taking care of herself on the ground. But give me Dern to probably win at least 2 rounds out of 3 just by walking her down, getting surprising amounts of success in the striking, and getting the fight to the ground enough that she's keeping Torres on the defensive and definitely winning rounds.
Yeah, man, this is I 100% understand what you're saying. I'm intrigued by this fight, but I kind of wish it didn't happen because I like the run that Tecia Torres is on. It's fun, but I also think you really, if you're the UFC, you need to give Dern like a win after her last performance. So it's just obviously the winner of this fight will be in a good situation, but the loser, especially if it's Dern, will be in a really bad situation. Dern, you talked about the improvements she made on her striking. That has to do with working with Jason Perlo, which is always a good thing. He's done wonders with people. She's pretty composed now. She does have a little problem, and she's got a strong base, strong legs. The problem is, I think her striking is still limited, just because she isn't the athlete that Perlo really needs. She's kind of slow. But as you mentioned, her striking is just to close the distance, where she is the absolute wizard on the ground. You mentioned 5-time world champion BJJ. She has 6 submission wins in the UFC. Incredible top control. Some of the slickest back takes you'll ever see. Crazy flexibility. You can get subbed pretty much from any position, top, bottom, on the feet, in a scramble, mid-scramble. She can make it happen. She can sweep. The issue with her is the issue that I've always had with straight BJJ guys, and there's plenty of other people. I mean, Ben Askren was very famous for saying it. She's not a good wrestler. And I believe if you have a 2-hour jiu-jitsu class, the first hour should be straight wrestling. It would make your jiu-jitsu game be so much more, because she struggles to get the fight to the ground. Her entries are just simply bad, and that she can pull guard like that. I think she needs to develop more of a Ryan Hall type game, where she's rolling underneath her opponent, trying to get Imanari rolls, somehow pulling guard, something like that. Now, Tecia Torres has looked really good in this run. I'm not going to get into the whole Angel Hill accusations, but she dominated Angel Hill, which is just a really good win. Angel Hill doesn't have the best record, but a lot of her fights that she's lost, she's given really good battles against opponents. And Torres looks the best she possibly has ever looked. Again, I'm not going to get into it. I'm not accusing her of anything, but it could just simply be a resurgence. Like, it happens, a late bloomer kind of thing. She can fight out of both stances. She has some high output. She's very fast. She fights in blitzes. Very good at getting in and out and landing shots, like landing and then getting out before counters. Throws a lot of combos. Kicking game is such a huge part of her game, especially because she's short. So that's the kind of way she uses long strikes, because she's really the smallest fighter in the division. But I doubt she's going to be throwing a lot of kicks, especially going against Mackenzie Dern. She's going to not want to give her a chance to catch a kick. Solid in the clinch, even though she's undersized. She struggled with like the biggest fighters in the weight class in the clinch, like Joanna Jacek had some success in the clinch against her. I don't know if Mackenzie Dern does, but Mackenzie Dern is one of the bigger ones in the weight class, and obviously such a different threat in the clinch, where she's trying to use a position to kind of get the back instead of trying to do damage in that or to get a takedown. But she doesn't really look for takedowns herself. She doesn't really look to wrestle. But if she gets taken down, she's hard to take down. And if she gets taken down, she does well to get back to her feet. And she has the cardio also to go deep in a fight and press at high pace. Torres not throwing kicks is going to be a really tough sell for me for her offensive game, because so much is surrounded by her kicks. However, she has really great footwork, in and out footwork. So yeah, she's going to have a huge mountain hurdle to overcome in the size difference. But if she's never chest to chest, she's never in those things, because she's just too quick and she's moving, L-stepping, kind of keep changing directions. I think she has such a huge speed advantage. I think she may be able to stay up to these takedowns and win the stand-up. And I'm going to say she does. I'm going to go with the New Englander, Fall River Zone, where I used to live, Fall River, Mass. I'll say Tecia Torres wins a unanimous decision.
There you go. A little dissension this far up the card as Keith and I fall on opposite sides of the near pick'em between Mackenzie Dern and Tecia Torres. Third from the top at UFC 273 is a welterweight matchup between Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev. Burns, the 35-year-old Brazilian, is 20-4 overall. He is 13-4 in the UFC. Significantly, he is 6-1 since moving up to welterweight, with the only loss in that span being in his title shot against Kamaru Usman at UFC 258 last February. He is a 3-time world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champ. He is a bronze medalist at Abu Dhabi, one of the best credentialed grapplers in the UFC right now. He is taking on Chimaev. The 27-year-old Chechen by way of Sweden is 10-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 4-0 since joining the UFC in summer of 2020. He is 2-0 at welterweight. Those two welterweight wins were over Reese McKee and Li Jingliang, whom he choked all the way to sleep at UFC 267 last October. That performance last October marked a comeback for him from a case of COVID that was severe enough that he, announced his retirement, either out of legitimate despair for his ongoing health, just general frustration, whatever the case may be. It took him nearly a full year between his win over Gerald Meerschaert and his fight against Li Jingliang. But in that fight, he certainly looked to be no worse for wear as he ran through the Leech in a way that basically nobody in the UFC has. And his propensity for doing things that we don't really see done in the octagon is one of the reasons that, despite the massive disparity in experience between these two, despite the massive disparity in actual in-cage accomplishments between these two, Chimaev is the biggest favorite on the card. He is minus 550. You can get Darian at plus 450 or so if you like. Keith, this is one of those fights, and you're shaking your head, and I'm not even going to steal your line. I'm not going to say it. I'll leave it for you to say. But Chimaev has that aura about him, like the aura of destiny thing, where the UFC is trying to put reasonable challenges in front of him. Like, the UFC is behaving like a responsible promotion, taking the blue chip prospect and bringing him along with sensible incremental upgrades in difficulty, and he's just blowing through them in a way that makes it look absolutely silly. And the example I keep coming back to when I think of someone who did this is John Jones, where, okay, you came in as this really heralded, but like 4-0 guy, and you like thrashed Andre Guzmão, like pile drove Stefan Bonner. Let's give you what's the name of the janitor? The
Vladimir Matyushenko.
Yeah, let's give you Vladimir Matyushenko, the tough as nails veteran. Never an easy out for anybody. This will be a good test. Just blows through him, makes it look ridiculous. All the way up to where he got the short notice, title shot against Shogun. Before like people thought he's probably a future champ, but this might be a little too soon. And then made one of the ultimate savages in the history of the sport tap to strikes.
Yeah.
Just every, at least until, he hit the top and all the problems started, every hurdle that they asked John Jones to jump, he just drove a truck through it.
And we don't know what the problems he was having back then. There wasn't,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, but we do know something. We know that basically he never had a serious training camp period his entire way up.
Yeah.
He was just snorting as much cocaine as he could afford at that time.
Was he still with the bomb squad then?
He was with when did he move to Jackson Wink? He moved to Jackson Wink.
No, was it not?
It was right before the Rashad fight, because that's what caused Rashad to split from Jackson Wink. And
was he with the bomb squad, or was it somewhere else?
No, it was Team Bomb Squad.
The bomb squad, yeah. New York, like Cortland, New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's Him and Rashad, two upstate New York guys fighting over real estate in New Mexico. Yeah. Anyway, like that's what it feels like with Chimaev, because on paper he's 4-0 in the UFC, but John Phillips and Reese McKee are both, I believe they're both out of the UFC. Neither of them was really UFC material. Gerald Meerschaert is a tough guy who's generally a tough out, but the optics, the way he blew through him, again, it's kind of like Jones versus Matyushenko or Jones versus Brandon Vera, where this was supposed to be a test and, you just said, get this out of here. And then, again, Li Jingliang, the questions were hanging over his head. Like, how's he going to be? He's going back down to 170. He's coming back from almost a year off with, COVID. So we know that a big chunk of that year off, he probably couldn't train at all. And not only does he run right through him, but he does it in a way we haven't seen from him at the UFC level and really haven't seen from anybody against Li. This is the next step. Like, this should be too much for a guy like Khamzat Chimaev. Gilbert Burns is 6-1 at welterweight, and the only loss is to Kamaru Usman. And you know what? Like, the end was brutal, but he had Usman in trouble early in their fight.
He had those skates, yeah.
Like, yeah, he wasn't that far from being the welterweight champ.
Yeah.
This should be way too much for Khamzat Chimaev, yet Chimaev is almost a 6-1 favorite here. And while I may not agree with the specific numbers there, I understand why.
Sure.
It's because at a certain point you go, I don't know what Chimaev is going to do here, but I've come to expect that he is going to pass this test with flying colors, because that's simply what he does every time out.
Yeah. If you're a Chimaev hater, this is your last chance to hate on him, because if he smokes Burns, there's no argument whether he hasn't beat anybody.
Nope, there's no argument.
Go on. And then the thing that stands out to me about Chimaev is, isn't a total strike something like pure insanity? Like, he's been hit one time in what is it, 4 UFC fights? It's something insane like that.
It is something like that. I think he got through the McKee and Meerschaert fights without taking a single strike, or I know the Lee fight, he didn't take a single strike.
I think it's one strike in 4 fights.
Yeah,
like Reese McKee landed a shot against him, and that's it. Yeah,
it's
something insane.
It's ridiculous.
Another broadcast. It's like 400 strikes to 1, something like that.
And I mean, Khamzat Chimaev, in terms of his physical attributes and his skill set, he is, and I know he's from Chechnya, not Dagestan, even though they are right next door to each other and, basically speak the same language. But he is what we were all terrified was going to come out of that region at some point, when like the Khabib and Rustam Khabilov types were coming up. Like, can you imagine a guy that like has that kind of wrestling, but also has just blinding hand speed and unbelievable power? Like, wouldn't that be terrifying?
And a bigger personality.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, here he is. He's on our doorstep. He's just a 10-fight veteran. And if he beats Burns convincingly, there's a good chance he's in line for a title shot next. There's not really anything else for him to do unless you just really hate Colby Covington and want to see something bad happen to him.
It seems like everyone's pushing. Yeah. Man, can we just talk about the balls about Neil Magny once more time? Because, like, dude, he's calling for a fight with this guy, which is, it's like calling for a fight with Ivan Drago.
Yeah, and a lot of fighters, when they say nobody wants to fight me, or I wanted to fight him and he didn't want to fight me, I don't believe him. Yeah. I believe it with Neil Magny. Like, he gets the pass. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Neil Magny has proven that anyone, anytime, anywhere, like, that's for real. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, Neil Magny, like, would it have surprised you that Neil Magny just fought this past Saturday in a absolute war a week ago? It would have surprised you at all if Neil Magny stepped up on 5 days' notice, moved up a weight class for Kevin Gastelum?
No, would not one bit.
Start me at 1 second.
Except that they fought already, like it would.
And he just had a war with, like, his fight was a back and forth close fight, and yeah, he probably sent an email to somebody asking for it.
Probably. Interesting thing about Burns is he defies a lot of the stereotypes of your BJJ guy or gal in MMA. Like, we just finished talking about Mackenzie Dern, how like her striking has come along, but it's still really limited. She's not a plus athlete, and her like she's a willing but ugly wrestler. None of that applies to Gilbert Burns. He is an explosive athlete.
Yep.
He is a good wrestler.
Yep. Great wrestler.
His striking was rudimentary at some point, but now he is tons of power, and he's one of the better strikers in the division. He's gone from
size for the division, which is funny that he has that power. He's undersized. Yeah. He's one of the smaller guys.
But
the size difference.
He's definitely not like
he's stocky.
He's stocky. I was super glad when he moved up to welterweight, because the thing is, all of his BJJ accomplishments happened at the grappling equivalent of welterweight. It was all at 76 kilos, which is 167, 168. So the idea that he had to cut all the way down to 155 for what is frankly a more physically demanding sport from 1 minute to the next, it's definitely harder on your cardio, was just ridiculous. And he still did pretty well. But at welterweight, he's been really, really good. He gave the champ as much trouble as anybody else has during his reign, and has handled everybody else. On paper, he's got the tools. But the only question I hope is answered in this fight, if Chimaev wins, is how's his gas tank at 170? I would like it if this thing went, at least to the third round, and we could see, if that's going to be a problem, because Chimaev's he's a big welterweight. He's tall. He's got ample muscle on him. He wasn't especially undersized at his fights at 185. Is his weight cut something that will present a problem if he can't just blow through somebody in 3 minutes? I'd like to learn that from this fight. Tell me who you got and how in this one.
Okay. Did you give your official prediction or not?
I did not give my official prediction, but you know what? My prediction is going to be Chimaev by decision.
Okay.
If Chimaev blitzes Burns on the feet and just flatlines him, well, I will have learned something new. But until I see somebody really do that to Burns, I'll withhold judgment. If Chimaev brings him to the ground, if he runs right through a 3-time Mundials champ like he's wet tissue paper, well, I will have learned something new. But until then, I am going to withhold judgment on that. And Burns, again, is the kind of powerful athlete and good wrestler that I'll be interested to see if Chimaev tries to take him down and he can't get him down. What does that look like? Does it start to make him tired? So give me Chimaev by decision, but I fully expect this to act I'm hoping, fingers crossed, and kind of expecting a great fight out of this. I think this will be a great fight that doesn't especially tarnish Burns and doesn't just send Chimaev up the ladder, but answer some questions about him.
Yeah. I wonder if this is a title eliminator. I wonder if the winner of this is getting a title shot against Usman, Edwards.
If Chimaev wins, yeah. If Burns wins,
if Burns beats him though, how can you deny him? I don't know. So
we got Luke and Muhammad fighting the week after.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but if you beat Osma, and I guess it depends how and everything, but I'll say this. I understand that the betting lines is not necessarily how Vegas is predicting the fight goes. So it's a lot of it has to do with matrices and way they expect money to come in and getting the most profit. I don't understand how it works, but I understand the concept. Gilbert Burns should not be a negative 450 underdog to anybody. If Gilbert Burns moved up in weight to fight Israel Adesanya, we talked about how small Gilbert Burns is short for the weight class. Former 155 pounder. Israel Adesanya is tall, lengthy, middleweight. Gilbert Burns wouldn't be a negative. Wouldn't be a positive 450 underdog against Israel Adesanya. It's crazy. But I get it because, dude, I am sold on Chimaev. I was raving about him for 2 or 3 fights now. I'm still raving on him. He's so well rounded. He is 100% or coming out the gate on fire, 100 miles per hour. He's huge for the weight class, as you mentioned. He's a great athlete. He's so freaking strong. Huge punching power. I mean, the KO of Gerald Meerschaert was such a thing of beauty. The way he just picked up Reese McKee, like I said last time, he picked him up like he was like a toddler. Blazing fast entries. I love that he chain wrestles. Like if he misses it, he can just turn the corner. Incredible control. The way he controlled Li Jingliang on the ground. He has Habib Nurmagomedov control. He has that Dagestani handcuff. We need to come up with something with like Chechen, the Chechen, he advances position so well. Incredible ground and pound. Battered Li Jingliang. Sub game, he's got 5 submissions on his record, even though he doesn't have that many fights. And I wrote down the Khabib control twice on my notes because that's how big I am on this guy. But it's a big step up in the competition. Like, yes, Li Jingliang is a really good fighter, like a borderline top 15 guy. Gilbert Burns is a great fighter. Like, this is a huge step up in competition. Now, Burns, fast hands, tight boxing, tight combos, thundering leg kicks. He hits hard. He knocked out Damian Maia. He almost knocked out Kamaru Usman. He does so many things well. Now, he doesn't like being pressured. That's how you fight Gilbert Burns. Go back to like the Alexei Konchenko fight. Like, Konchenko was having success pushing Burns back. David Maia actually pushed him back and got back him against the fence. Got his leg and everything by pushing Burns back. Usman pushing back by using the jab and pressure. So that's how you kind of fight Burns, and that's what the style Chimaev has. Now Burns, obviously, he's good pocket boxer, strong, dirty boxing, and on the ground he really is. He's as you mentioned, I think he was a 3-time BJJ world champion, Mundial world champion. Good takedowns. He showed that in his last fight against Stephen Thompson. Very quick level changes. Also, like, showed that he can wrestle. He picked up slammed Tyron Woodley. Good body lock takedowns. Great hip control. Threw Gunnar Nelson with a judo throw going back a couple fights ago. Slick his back takes. Great, as I mentioned, great top control. And if he gets to get the fight down, he's one of the guys he'll actually pull hard. Now, Chimaev, I'm huge on Burns. I really like Burns as a fighter, but I'm all in on Chimaev. I have question marks about Chimaev's defensive skills because he dominates so quick. You don't really have to see him moving his head, working that. I have huge question marks about his cardio, as you mentioned. I have huge question marks about his chin because no one touches it. Like, how durable is this guy? But one thing I don't have to worry about, his wrestling. I don't have to worry about his power. I see him going right at Burns. I see him forcing Burns back in uncomfortable positions right out the gate, and I'm believing the destiny, man. I'm like I said, I'm all in on Chimaev. I see Chimaev knocking Burns out. I won't say in that very first round. I'm gonna say he knocks. I say he starches Burns. Give me Chimaev by first round. Now, I'm not going to be on the recap, so I'm going to do this. I'm making a bold prediction. I'm giving my Bulls right now, and I'm pushing Chimaev #1 on my Bulls list.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 273. As I mentioned during the introduction, it is, of course, a rematch and a bantamweight title unification bout between incumbent champ Aljamain Sterling and the interim champ Petr Yan. Sterling, the 32-year-old New York native, is 20-3 overall. He is 12-3 since joining the UFC as a former bantamweight champion in both CFFC and ROC, so king in the North, or Northeast at least. He is on a 6-fight winning streak since getting knocked out by Marlon Moraes all the way over 5 years ago at this point. But most notable among those, of course, was his win by DQ in a fight he was probably losing at the time last March at UFC 259. Since then, it's been a long road, surgery, recovery. He is now back and ready to go, ready to try and defend/unify his title against the man who has continued to prosper during his absence. Petr Yan, 29-year-old from Siberia, is 16-2 overall. He is 8-1 since joining the UFC as a former Absolute Championship Berkut, now ACA bantamweight champ. The only loss in his 9-fight UFC run is that disqualification loss to Sterling. Prior to that, he had been on a streak where he'd beaten John Dodson, Jimmy Rivera, Uriah Faber, and Jose Aldo. The last two of those by knockouts, definitely had fought his way to the top. And after the setback against Sterling, came back last October at UFC 267, won a straightforward unanimous decision over Corey Sandhagen to win the interim title. Odds were close their first time around. They are not this time. Jan minus 500, Sterling plus 350 as the substantial underdog. I guess I assume that the odds look like what they do because of how much people saw the first fight, where after 3 rounds, most people had it 2-1 for Jan. A few people had it 2-1 for Sterling, but Jan was definitely winning the 4th round before the illegal blow. So, the trend was Jan is starting to pull away and starting to win this fight. So they see that and they're like, well, at worst, they're going to pick up where they left off. At best, Sterling is not as good as he was before. He's been on the shelf for 13 months. He's permanently compromised in some way by the injury, and it's going to be even worse. So I understand why the odds are the way they are, but I think I did learn that this isn't a great style matchup for Sterling anyway. It's interesting. I think the things that Aljamain Sterling really is best at don't always line up with how he presents. Like coming up, he was really a grappler. Like that was what was really great about him coming up. He comes from funk style wrestling. It's right in his nickname. He is the Funk Master, and a lot of funk style wrestlers, it lends itself well to grappling. Especially because and MMA grappling, because you don't even have to worry about like back points and things like that. You can Granby roll all day long, and if it ends up with you being able to take a man's back or slap a Suloev stretch on him, as we've seen the man do. So Sterling took to MMA grappling like a fish to water, but on his way up, his striking was rudimentary. Like he's always been a good kicker, just got long legs, got power, pretty fast, and he has the kicking game of a man who is not afraid to be taken down. His boxing has only really come along in the last few years, but even so, like at his best, going up against Jan, the best boxer in the division, like it almost doesn't matter. I think Jan he's a rough matchup for Sterling because his gas tank is a little better. He's not quite as big, but he's a faster athlete. Like he's, stereotypes aside, of the two of them, Petr Yan is the guy who's athletic and explosive. Like he's blindingly fast hands, blindingly fast kicks. He is a good wrestler himself and capable of taking care of himself on the ground. But more to the point, he was largely able to avoid the ground in their first fight, and I don't think that's going to change this time. I just think it's a bad matchup for Sterling. I think we're going to see Jan just use his outstanding footwork, his superior hand speed to mark Sterling up, make him pay for some of his kicks, make him pay for his takedown attempts. And I think Jan probably unifies the titles here with a dominant decision.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm surprised by the lines again. And I mean, when have we ever seen a guy fight a guy that he just beat in his return fight, and he's that big of an underdog? Obviously, a little bit. Matt Serra, maybe. George St. Pierre, Matt Serra. I obviously I'm joking there. I'll say this. So the last fight was like a pick'em fight. I don't think it should be a pick'em fight, but I think the line should be closer. Like, I expected Jan to be a favorite. I expected it to be about like negative 250, negative 220. I think the fight was a little closer than a lot of people remember, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. Yes, Jan was pulling away. Like, I'm not saying he wasn't going to win, but there's a reason why they fight 25 minutes. So, Sterling is a much better fighter than people pretend he is. Like, now again, you mentioned a lot of things about him that could no longer be true. And then having neck surgeries and stuff like that is extremely concerning. He could be a shell of his last self. But assuming it doesn't affect him, assuming we have the same fighter that we had the last fight, he's a much better fighter than people think. Like the whole give him shit, he was faking and he's scared, and I'm like, stop, guys. He fights the baddest dudes on the planet for a living. Like, stop. He's a long and lengthy fighter who can fight out of both stances. I agree that his striking has come a long way, but I think it's like all the intangibles around his striking. He learned how to use his length well. Again, he learns how to fight out of both stances. He's got good movement. He's elusive, pretty fast. Not Jan fast, but he's pretty fast. Good head movement, high output, long striking skills. Kind of unorthodox in the way he lands. They come from like weird angles. Dude probably has like long arms. He just touches. He's not a like fight any power kind of puncher, but the power it seems to be developing. I mean, he hurt Pedro Munoz. He was targeting Pedro Munoz's body, which I liked. He's a funk wrestler, but he's also like a funk striker. He'll throw out fun stuff like a spinning back elbows, kicks from like every position, as you mentioned, tons of kicks, leg kicks. He's had a lot of success in fights with calf kicks. His long arms, when it comes to wrestling, is good for takedowns because he's not fast on the end, like his entrance. He almost like dives in. We saw that in the Jan fight, especially at the end. He was kind of diving in. But he's good at chaining together. Like if he gets a position, he can cut a corner. One of these guys will like he'll instead of getting the takedown, he'll like jump on a backpack you. But he has that like Michael Kessler long out of position, but still gets it because of his long arms, and he's relentless. You mentioned he's definitely a great grappler in the back takes and incredible submission. I mean, you see what he did to Corey Sandhagen, who is a great fighter, and he just took him down, submitted him real quick. He has 8 submission wins. You mentioned the Sula stretch, which is, besides being a great grappler, it's also due to his frame, his long legs, his ability to hang on your back. And he showed really good output in the fight against Pedro Munoz in cardio. Now, we didn't see that in Jan. He seemed like a guy who was fading. Maybe he'll have a little bit of cardio in this fight. Like we see the cardio that was making him a threat. Now, Jan, the one thing about Jan where I love watching him, I love studying him. He's a master. The one thing that's held me out to not go all in on him like I've gone with Chimaev is his mentality. He's so calm and he'll give rounds away. He plays. It's very John Jones. Even though John Jones hasn't lost a lot of rounds in his career, but John Jones' strategy is to win a fight over 25 minutes. I'm setting traps in the first round to catch you in the trap in the 4th and 5th round. Pichel the same way. He loves studying his foes, picking up their tails. Now this gets him off to a slow start, but it's good for 25 minutes. 25 minutes helps him. The longer the fight, the better chance he has. But early fights, early rounds are close. I mean, you go to like the Sandhagen fight. It was close early, and then he started pulling away. And that's due to his so experienced boxer. He's had something like 250 boxing matches. But I am concerned that he could be much better than a guy and just you give away too many rounds. You give away 2 rounds, now you have to go perfect last 3. And the guy just has a good round, you could lose a fight. Good example of that is Jimmy Rivera. Like he was losing huge portions of the fight, and he caught like big shots at the end of the round and kind of stole the rounds back. He also gave like moments to Jose Aldo. Like I keep mentioning that. Like Jose Aldo had more success than he should have. But when he's opening up and he's letting his hands go, so he can fight out of both stances, cuts angles perfectly, continually to surprise the arsenal, like different attacks, so much variety. He'll just start marching down his foe, setting traps. He throws the spots. We talked about Jairzinho Rozenstruik knockout of Augusto Kai landing, throwing to a spot. That's what Jan does. It's just what the elite strikers do. Nice snap on his punches, not a lot of tells. He hits hard. Though I don't like his defense. It's hard to get through, but he has like a turtling up boxing defense, which works for him. I still have concerns with kicks in that. I'm still concerned with takedowns. But when you go in for takedown, he's so elusive and athletic. You talked about his athleticism in scrambles. Back to his striking, his straight right is so sharp. Works uppercuts more than most people do. And then he can wrestle body lock, trip tile, great in scrambles. You want to see him what he really can do in grappling besides the Sterling fight. Go back to like his fights against Magomedov, who's down Bellator. Some really really fun scrambles. This is one loss. Oh, besides the disqualification against Sterling, he has one loss against Magomedov. I thought he won both of those fights. I just want to put down the record, but they were really good fights. But his hand speed is unmatched. He's a perfect example of the builder. I'm surprised when I watched the first fight. I was surprised at how quickly Jan picked up the timing of Sterling. Where I'm not surprised that he picked it up, but like how early. It was like the second round, and then he just started building, and that's not what he does. He slowly builds up. He settled in, and Sterling had no answer, and we saw a lot of panic in Sterling at that point, which we haven't seen before. The speed and accuracy separation was huge. The level of knowledge in the striking gap was huge. I was really impressed with how hard of a time Sterling was having in trying to get Jan down. Like he wasn't even close to taking him down. I think this comes down to Jan cruising or not. If Jan decides to cruise to give rounds away, Sterling has a shot. But if Jan comes out more aggressive, even if he's throwing shots just to score points, not necessarily could still set up his traps, but just stay busy. Don't get outworked completely, like he did early with Sterling. This could be a huge margin victory for Jan. I'm going to say he loses the first round and then wins the next four. Give me Jan new 49-46 decision.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC 273. It is a featherweight title fight featuring Alexander Volkanovski and Chan Sung Jung, better known as the Korean Zombie. Volkanovski, the 33-year-old Australian, is 23-1 overall. He is on a truly ridiculous 20-fight win streak. The last 10 of those in the UFC, the last 5 of those against the best of the best: Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, Max Holloway twice, and Brian Ortega. The most recent of those, the Ortega fight, he won by unanimous decision at UFC 266 last September. He will be taking on Korean Zombie. The 35-year-old South Korean is 17-6 overall. He is 7-3 since joining the UFC out of the merger/acquisition with World Extreme Cage Fighting. He is, as I said, 7-3 in the UFC. He is 4-2 since returning from a 3-year plus hiatus due to mandatory military service in the South Korean Army. He is coming off a win, a fairly dominant win over Dan Ige in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 25 last June. That allowed him to bounce back from a decision loss to Ortega back in October of 2020. I said earlier on this show that Gilbert Burns was the biggest favorite on the card. That is incorrect. It is actually Volkanovski. He is minus 700. Jung Zombie plus 500 as of about a week out from fight night. So make of that what you will. You can see from Keith's face. And it's a good thing I'm going to toss this.
What's MMA?
Keith.
Sorry.
No, I'm about to hand it to you anyway. Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me who you think wins this and how.
So do me a favor. Tell me exactly what those lines are. I know they were outrageous. I just want to make sure I know exactly. What was it again? Volkanovski's what?
Minus 700, Jung plus 500.
Okay. I understand why Volkanovski's a favorite. I'm not arguing that. But 700?
And that's at best. Some of these sites he's minus 800.
Oh my Lord. Volkanovski is great. You won't find a bigger Volkanovski fan than me. I've been backing Volkanovski for a long time. I'm not going to pretend like I picked against, that I picked him against Holloway the first fight. I picked Holloway, but I was one of those guys who was like, Volkanovski is really freaking good. He can win this fight. He's got to fight perfect, and he really did. So I'm huge. I'm a huge Volkanovski fan, but Jesus Christ, like, I'm not a gambler. I don't gamble based on some former family history. I really try not to gamble, but Jesus Christ, if I was a gambler, the Korean Zombie at plus 500. I mean, like I would have guessed if someone came to me, what's the line? I'd say like negative 225 for Volkanovski. Like I expected him to be the favorite, and I understand when you have title wins with negative center. That's the lines Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko get.
And worth noting that Amanda Nunes lost.
She lost. Yeah, good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Alex Volkanovski so let me get back to this. Alex Volkanovski is one of my favorite fighters. He does so many things that just jump over. He's really, if you like tape studying, Volkanovski is one of the funnest guys to watch because he's so technically sound and clean. So he's a short, compact striker. He has deficiencies for, when we talked about like with Mickey Gall, we said, hey, he has all these things going on, but he has these natural tools that God gave him. Volkanovski doesn't have that. I think he's short for the weight class, a little shrimp, but he's so intelligent and he's underrated. His hand speed, his pressure counter striking, the way he cuts the cage off so well, does a lot of like you go back to like the back. The thing what I love about Volkanovski is you can break down different fights and see different tools, and he's always adding to his game. Something that I talked about Dustin Poirier too, that you see in different fights, you see more things. Hand fighting, mastering hand fighting against Max Holloway, and I believe it was the first fight. Great at counter striking, using feints well, quick movement, just a little short bursts. He sets up. You go back to like the Chad Mendes fight and the Darren Elkins fight, and he's setting up his attacks with a busy, crisp jab. Goes over to then after the jab, he's following up with overhand right. Goes to work in the body in the Ortega fight, with the Chad Mendes fight. Just way too fast in the Ortega fight. Great footwork in the Jose Aldo fight and the Max Holloway and the Brian Ortega fight. Just the way he just darts around. It's funny because people talk about the best footwork, and we always bring up Dominic Cruz. That's like the guy that always gets credit because of how much movement he does. Volkanovski has a very Dominic Cruz style to him. Like he's not moving out all the time, but when he moves, like I think about it like a joystick. Like someone's controlling a joystick with Dominic Cruz, and he's going crazy. And like Volkanovski, it's like the same move with joystick, but it's just like it spurts. Really, really good. Great output. He picks up reads really quick. Hard leg kicks. And he's not a technically sound wrestler. He's just like a quick get on your hips and then just pure strength you through things that very few guys can do. He doesn't chain wrestle takedowns together. He might just blast through you. But he's so strong. He grabs the hips, lifts you up, slams you. Fantastic ground and pound. And I like how composed he is in bad situations. When you go to the Brian Ortega fight, how many people get caught in a deep submission with Brian Ortega? We've seen the ability to just Brian Ortega to finish fights. The fights that he's losing gets that 1 second. That's the thing we were talking about Brian Ortega, is how like opportunistic he is. And Volkanovski stayed super calm and found a way to get out of it, which is truly tremendous. Now, Chan Sung Jung, he looks so flat against Brian Ortega that he looked like a guy that was declining, and then against Dan Ige looked completely different person. Like regenerated, looked like this is the Chan Sung Jung that we thought could win a title one day. And when I say we, I'm talking about the MMA world, not Vegas. He's a great boxer. He's got huge power in his hands. He's got knockout power in both hands. He also likes a lot to hand fight. I think we might have a lot of that with these two guys grabbing and pulling. He uses it to find range. He really steps into his shots. His pull right hand, where he kind of fades into it and think beauty. He'll get his opponent to chase them and then counter and kind of throw to where they're going to step. Something that I always thought Joanna and John Jacek did really well. He was a little gun shy against Ortega, and he was dropping his hands a lot in that fight. And I think that might have been Ortega stood and banged with him pretty much the whole fight, and he didn't expect that. I think he was expecting shots. So I'm going to almost give him a pass a little bit in the Ortega fight and think the Dan Ige fight is the guy that we're going to see. He's a good grappler. He's an underrated grappler. I mean, this guy hit a twister in a fight. He hardly ever offensive grapples, but if he does, he's got 8 submission wins. Yeah, those submissions were a really long time ago, back to 2012. Sure, mandatory military duty will extends that a little longer than it should, but still a very long time. Strong takedown defense. He's not easy to take down. Good get up game if he is taken down. And just the pure toughness. We've seen him in fight after fight in wars where he's battling in real time. Like, he could be getting destroyed by Volkanovski, and he's still going to be throwing hard. Late in the fight. Now, I was ranting and raving about the lines, and I still feel like they're really off. It's a really fun fight, but I am taking Volkanovski. I see him darting in and out of range, being too quick, using his speed, threatening with the takedowns, mixing that in. I just see him being too much for the Korean Zombie, getting guessing. So even though I rave about the line being soft, I really only see one advantage for the Korean Zombie, and that's just pure power, punching power. And I think that is, if the Korean Zombie wins, it probably won't be a decision. It'll be catching Volkanovski with a big shot, which is extremely possible, or catching a submission in a transition, but I think a little less possible. But I'm still pretty confident. I think Volkanovski is going to sweep the scorecard. So give me Alex Volkanovski 50-45 scorecard.
Great. Like I like your breakdown of Zombie's skill set. He really does, for a guy that's sort of, I mean, he's almost certainly the most successful Korean mixed martial artist, certainly in UFC history.
Oh, absolutely.
He really defies a lot of the stereotypes of the Korean fighter. And you and I have both been watching this long enough, and anyone who's been watching since like the late, aughts, the stereotype of the South Korean fighter is pathologically aggressive, caution to the wind brawlers. Like,
Yeah.
they make shoot a box look like a yoga school.
He can do it a little, but yeah, I get you.
He can do it a little, but like obviously, that's what the Rodriguez fight ended up turning into. But at heart, he's a fundamentally sound, composed boxer who, you already pointed out, is criminally underrated as an opportunistic grappler. He hit the first twister in UFC history. He choked Dustin Poirier to sleep with a Bravo choke. I mean, he's a fantastic.
I forgot to mention, he's a much better athlete than he gets credit for. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, like great athlete, like fast, coordinated, physically strong, for the weight class. Let me ask you this. Like, if if somebody just tells you, spoils it for you, says Chan Sung-jung won the title and he stopped Volkanovski, what's your guess? Did he do it with strikes or with a submission?
I'd say strikes. I think he'd catch him with a punch. But it could happen in the ground.
It could, and I had been leaning towards, well, now if that happens, it's probably a submission. But Volkanovski's wrestling doesn't really lend itself to making chaotic scrambles. Like, it's sort of a controlled wrestling attack. He's definitely not a funk guy. And as you pointed out, he's not a guy that will just like grab a single and then just keep chaining things, shifting, because that's where you end up with a lot of your scrambles and chaotic situations where something weird happens. Somebody's back gets taken out of nowhere, somebody just lands inside control or mounts. No, like Volkanovski, like, he wrestles like an American college power wrestler. I expect the action on the feet to play out exactly as you've laid it out there. I'm interested to see whether Volkanovski mixes in occasional takedowns just to keep Jung on his toes, just to kind of keep him honest. Maybe if it wins him around, great, but not intending to like finish the fight there, but just, to break Jung's rhythm and just give him one more thing to think about. And I'm interested to see how it looks if he does that. But I'm with you. Jung has superior one-shot power, probably, even though Volkanovski is a very hard hitter himself. But he doesn't have the kind of power where I think he's going to make Volkanovski pay, going to be able to make Volkanovski pay for like one single mistake in a fight-changing way. And for that reason, I think this fight is kind of built for Volkanovski to win rounds. He's one of the most intelligent fighters in the sport. He's one of the most well-rounded fighters in the sport. It's kind of stunning that he's picked this up as a guy who I think he only even got into martial arts in like his early 20s after basically being on track for a football career. Yeah, just a remarkably
right?
Australian rules football. It was either rugby or Australian rules football. I can't remember which.
I'm sorry, I don't know the difference. Sorry.
One of the ones where they don't wear pads because they were just some hard dudes. But
sorry, I thought rugby, that was the same thing. Okay.
But yeah, just a remarkably intelligent. Well, I was going to say he's never lost a bad fight, but he's basically never lost a fight. You know, aside from like his third or fourth professional fight, and to string together 20 straight wins in a sport as unpredictable as mixed martial arts, you need at least a little luck, but you also need to just basically never make a bad mistake, never have a bad game plan, you know, and just never make a serious tactical error, especially at the level he's been fighting at for the last few years, where he's fighting against the best of the best of the best and people who theoretically should be able to make him pay. That's just a tall order for Korean Zombie. I'm with you. Give me Volkanovski by unanimous decision and probably wins either 4 rounds or all 5.
Yeah, and just to point out, like Volkanovski, who has lost 1 fight, that was 2 weight classes above his current weight. He lost at 170.
The video is out there. If you want to see Alexander Volkanovski's like 1 career loss, okay, it's in a ring. He's fighting a 170-pound man, because keep in mind that Volkanovski walked around at like 200, 210 pounds when he played football. He was just like this little tank of a guy. And
at 4'11".
Yeah. Yeah, like the video's out there. I saw some people tweeting it around today. I had seen it before anyway, but it looks like a finger fighting a thumb.
Finger fighting a thumb. I love that.
I first said that when I heard that Invicta is making Alicia Zappatella versus Emily Ducote.
Oh, yeah.
But that's going to look like a finger fighting a thumb. But yeah, like Volkanovski versus that guy that beat him way back in 2012 or 23. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, this has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 273, Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. With me, as always, has been Keith Schillen. Hope you enjoyed this. If this is your first time watching one of our previews, you should be aware that we do a live recap right after the main event. You know, typically we're on about 10, 15 minutes after the main event, live on the Sherdog YouTube page, or you can get a link there from the Sherdog.com front page, where we will talk about all these fights, break them down, react. The live chat on the YouTube page is open, so we're taking your hot takes, your questions, and just talking about what was good, what was bad, what was controversial, what is next for the winners as well as the losers. And considering that we've got Khamzat Chimaev, the Sterling versus Jan grudge match, and then maybe asking ourselves whether Alex Volkanovski is the top pound-for-pound fighter in the world and where he ranks on the greatest featherweights of all time, there's going to be plenty of talk to be had afterwards. If I recall correctly, Keith is not going to be there for that one. So I'll either be flying solo or I will bring in a special guest. We've done solo ones on these before, and then it's a lot of just me going back and forth with you. But either way, we hope to see you there. Between now and then, thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the fights.